You are on, yeah. Yeah, great stuff. Thank you very much. Staying up. Okay, great stuff. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Board of Directors meeting in public. Of course, with the current circumstances, we are dealing with this as a kind of closed loop call online. But just a reminder to people that this meeting is recorded and will be placed up on YouTube. And of course, we do advise members of the public of the existence of the meeting and invite questions should they be required. I'm not aware of any having been tabled, and so we can crack on with the meeting as we are in terms of the agenda. Okay, so it's great to have everybody with us. I know that we do have apologies from Mel. Just sorry to share with you that yeah, Mel's feeling a bit rough. She's got virus-like symptoms, and obviously recognising that this is a broadcasted video, I'll not say too much, but I know that she has had negative results, thankfully, for COVID. But we'll see how she is, and I've been in touch with Mel over the last couple of days. So hopefully she's going to be well, but sadly she's had to provide her apologies to these meetings as she's not feeling particularly well. I think it's come on quite suddenly. I know that she has been working from home during the course of the week. So that's Mel. Do I need to note any other apologies? Laura, may I turn to you and ask whether you are aware of any, please?
I'm not aware of any other apologies, but just aware that Saj, Ray and Karen need to leave at 12 o'clock today.
Yeah, superb, yeah, that's fine. So, and I realise why, and in fact I'm hoping Saj and Karen will tell us a little bit about the finalists of the Hsg Awards that I think they're going along to support. So we'll perhaps just hear a little bit about our winners in that sense, and be great to just celebrate that as a board. Okay, so we're here. We've got quite a lot to get through, of course, today. It is quite a long meeting. I'll make sure we try and build in some breaks. And obviously, having heard the reports from myself and the opportunity for John and Saj to talk about chief executive type business, we will, of course, go through the academy business, finance and performance, quality, which has 2 or 3 bespoke items for us to consider there, and people as well does have a couple of bespoke issues. We'll review our strategy issues, think about partnerships and the way we're working together with colleagues throughout the system, and then we'll make sure we've got some good time on some audit and assurance matters, so some important issues there, as well as reviewing, of course, our board assurance framework and strategic risk register. We do need to just consider the work of the audit committee. We'll hear from Barry about that, and the annual report, be assured by the annual report indeed. We'll finish with some governance matters and then consider our outcomes. There are, of course, for directors, some closed matters to deal with. So we try to make those the exception rather than the rule. But when, for example, we need to consider competing bids for services provided to us, then obviously we would wish to discuss that in a closed meeting. And so for an hour or so afterwards, there is a closed meeting for us to consider some matters. May I ask whether anybody brings any other business, or whether, having reviewed the agenda, we're content that we've got what we need at our board meeting? And that would appear to be the case. There doesn't appear to be any other business being raised. I will, of course, accept it during the course of the meeting if necessary, but that's where we are. Great stuff. Okay. I'm also conscious, of course, that I always look forward to this. We're going to start our meeting with hearing from the clinical business unit, critical care, anaesthesia and pain, and a terrific set of slides that were circulated. So thank you to the guys that organised those, and that kind of tone or ethos of how you've coped during the course of the pandemic and the adaptations you've had to make is very welcome, and we look forward to beginning with yourselves. I'm going to start as chairman. I'm conscious, I know that we've got a lot to get through, but there are just a couple of thanks that I'm really keen to note in this public board meeting. In a sense, it's an endorsement of the efforts of our executive colleagues who are cracking on with running the place in extremely unusual circumstances, but to make sure that there is a whole board, a unitary board, ethos in the way that we work. And so some thanks I just want to quickly mention of recent examples of that are the development session that was run just last month, and particularly involved a lot of effort and input from Hsg and from John. You might remember on Indeed clinical business unit development and our relationship as a board and understanding what the CBUs are doing and how we might support that. And indeed, we spent a significant amount of time on our leadership review and thought about, we know we're well led according to CQC, but we don't want to rest on laurels, and we want to get better and better at that. So thank you to Sergeant John for the time spent on that. Also a further thanks, John, I'm not picking on you today, John Holden, but a further thanks to you. Thank you for the session on the 9th of November, just a week or so ago, on strategy. That was terrific. And it's nice actually to note that in some way that was it happened as a result of feedback from non-executive colleagues, but also from what we heard at our Council of Governors meeting, and the idea of just making sure you've done everything you can to try and get everybody's involvement. So I thought that was a terrific session. Well done to the non-exec directors who made it. I think it was all of us. Really, really powerful feedback. And I know from John that he was very pleased with the way the meeting went there. So thank you to that, for that. It's another thanks for Matthew Horner, and Aubrey Sitch actually deserves a thank you. There was a terrific session run for non-exec directors on our Scan for Safety programme. So of course we've heard about it and read papers in passing about the programme and the initiative, but Paul Rice, thank you Paul, just organised a bit of a session where we could have a briefing. I have to compliment Aubrey. Particularly, Matthew obviously let Aubrey have the time in that, and the quality of the input that he provided us and the way in which he dealt with queries and questions was absolutely terrific. So again, thank you particularly to exec colleagues for making that happen. It really was a useful session, and you had a full team of non-exec directors who left that much better briefed and understanding, and perhaps ways in which we might support that work and also link it to all the strategic objectives indeed that we're trying to do. And I'm going to finish my thanks. I'm sorry to take a few minutes at the start, but these are important. I spoke with the 3 academy chairs yesterday about the work of Katie Shepherd, a fairly recently appointed corporate governance manager. And John, I can see you nodding there, and Laura, I hope you will take this back, but we as directors wish to thank Katie for the quality of the work that she's putting in. I know that that's universally felt by the academy chairs. So the draft reports that she provides for them have been terrific, and she deserves a special mention, given that she's, well, like I say, only been with us fairly recently. She's doing a terrific job. So well done, Katie, and thanks for helping us do the best we can, and indeed work towards the being as well led as we possibly can. So that does me thanks. I'm sorry if I've missed anything in particular, but I think it was important. There were 3 aspects of executive colleagues making sure we're well briefed, and terrific work from our new corporate governance manager under Laura and John's supervision, of course. So well done, and thank you for all that. Sergeant Karen, I realise that yourselves and Ray will be leaving us a little earlier today, happily, to travel down to the Hsg Awards. And I thought it might just be nice for the board of directors just to hear what skin we've got in the game there, if I might use that phrase. So what are we doing there, and who has been successful in getting down to the Hsg Awards? Saj, should I turn to you first, please?
Yeah, Chair, what we've intended to do is that as part of the Chief Exec's update, John will pick up obviously all of the awards that we've been finalists for or nominated for through his update. But you are right, just by way of a quick update tonight, we are going down to the Hsg Awards, and they are one of the most prestigious awards for the health service within the UK. We've been shortlisted in 2 categories. So we've got James Taylor as Clinical Leader of the Year. And we've got the acute sector innovation with the COVID heat mapping work that's been done and undertaken. Just to give you a feel for the scale, over 1,000 entries that go in to the 23 categories that the HSJ has. And there's 204 finalists. So our two teams and individuals that have been nominated have been selected from a significant cohort of applications. So I think congratulations due there just to get down to the final 200. And then, of course, tonight what we'll hear about is the 23 winners in each of those categories. And of course, for me, just getting to the finalists, every single one of those individuals is really a winner, and we're really proud of the work that's happening. Like I say, I don't add anything else to that because I know John's got a section as part of the Chief Exec's update where he will brief on the awards that we've recently achieved. And I will, a bit of a spoiler alert, but we have received another award just overnight, but I won't go into that any further.
I think I may have seen that one on Twitter, Serge. I'm hoping that's the one you're referring to. It looks great. So terrific, yeah. And we often reflect, don't we, or we ask ourselves whether, as Bradford, we shout up enough about many of the achievements that we are doing. So I know many of us keep our heads down, just keep working. But this is great. It would be nice to hear a little bit more about that from the Chief Executive's report, provided, I think, in the first place by John. So, Serge, thank you very much indeed for that. That's great. Okay. At item 2, we're asked to note the declarations of interest. May I ask whether they reflect an accurate record of the interests that we may have? I think it's well maintained, isn't it? We keep up to that. That's great. And may I ask also, of course, that any director raises with me any particular interest they may have in matters before today's board. Thank you very much. I should say sorry to our CBU colleagues for just waiting through that, but you'll see why I would have wanted to express my thanks as chairman to some of our colleagues for the work they've been doing in creating that unitary board feel for the work we do. And I'm going to pass back to Serge now because I'm delighted to welcome members of the Critical Care CBU. And I do know we've got guests here, but I won't try and name everybody and maybe invite those to say hello and let us know who they are. But I'll turn to you now, Serge, and we're very pleased as a board of directors to hear about the work taking place in this particular CBU. Serge.
Thanks, Max. Max, I'm deflecting everything today, so I am going to actually pass on to Ray. As you say, we've got an amazing team here to give us an update, but I'm going to ask Ray to give us a quick introduction before he hands over to the rest of the team. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.
Thanks, Serge, and thanks, Max. So I'm particularly personally delighted to have the Critical Care Anaesthetic and Pain CBU joining us today. Obviously, that's very much close to my heart as an anaesthetist myself. The focus today really is on critical care, and we mentioned award winners. I think there are two members of the team who are here today who have been recognised with national awards, so Cordy and Tom. I'll let Rishi introduce the team individually as clinical director for the CBU, but I just really wanted to say, obviously, we know, everybody knows, not just those involved in healthcare, that the work of critical care has been absolutely front and centre over the last 20 months. We've all seen the pictures on TV, and we've seen it in the papers, and some of us have the privilege to actually see them directly in action as well. But it's been so much more than that, and I think the team today hope to give you a flavour of some of the work that's gone in that perhaps you don't know about. So that some of the preparation that's gone on, some of the innovation that they've been really leaders nationally with, and some of the stuff that has impacted on the team, the challenges, but also the support and the sense of teamwork, I think, that you feel when you go into intensive care is absolutely incredible. I'm a fairly frequent visitor down there, and you really get that sense when you walk onto the intensive care unit about how there is that mutual support. So they're a fantastic team. They've looked after each other as well as looking after our patients throughout the pandemic. I really want to express my thanks at this public board for all the work that they've done, putting themselves often in harm's way to look after our patients, and I'm incredibly grateful, as I know the whole board will be, for the work that they've done. So on that note, I'll hand over to Hsg to make the introductions, and then I'm sure he'll pass on to the team to talk us through some of their work. So thanks, Hsg.
Good morning, Hsg.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much, Ray. As Ray said, my name is Hsg Khanna. I'm Clinical Director for Anaesthetics and Critical Care. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to talk about our CBU today. And as Ray said, specifically the critical care response to COVID. Specifically, we were going to discuss the innovative collaborative approach that was taken to deal with really what was a sort of once in a lifetime, never experienced before pandemic. So without further ado, in the room, I'd like to introduce Sarah Cooper, who is our clinical lead for critical care, and Cordy, who is critical care physio team leader, and remotely there is Tom Lawton and Andy Baker. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're ready for the slides, if that's possible to have the slides shared. Thank you very much. So if we can move on to the first slide in the deck. Thank you very much. So yeah, like the rest of the world really, from Christmas 2019 onwards, we were watching with mounting levels of fear and dismay really, news coming in from across the world about a novel, highly infectious virus that caused respiratory illness and catastrophic respiratory problems for the most vulnerable people. And it became obvious very quickly that we were facing a huge problem and that we were going to have to think quickly and outside the box to prepare everything we needed to prepare in terms of our knowledge about how to manage this disease, about how to make sure that we had enough people who knew how to manage it, that we had enough equipment, that we had enough clinical spaces to manage it, and that we could keep patients safe from each other and staff safe from patients and staff safe from each other. So the beginning of the preparation phase was involved a lot of fear and anxiety for the whole team. We didn't know whether we would be safe. We thought we wouldn't be. We didn't know whether we'd be able to keep our families safe. We didn't know whether we would know enough about the disease to look after our patients well enough. There was an awful lot of learning to do. And so as purpose and energy built, that took over from the fear and anxiety to a huge extent. And then there was a massive amount of work done throughout the whole trust, but in ICU, an awful lot of work done by the whole team with support from all areas of the trust, as I say, to start getting ready. And Cordy and Tom later is going to talk a lot more about the CPAP service that we set up at PACE, but Cordy next is going to talk about some of the preparations that were made by the physio team in conjunction particularly with the respiratory team and the medicine for the elderly team to get ready. And Andy Baker is going to talk about aspects of staff training that we undertook in this preparation phase. The next slide, please. Thank you.
So from a physio perspective, as a respiratory physio team, we're quite well experienced in looking after patients with acute respiratory problems and who need non-invasive ventilation like CPAP. So we were kind of the team who would be able to help deliver a CPAP service. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about this because Tom will go into the detail on this, but just to say this was the other half of my team. So the ward team led by Liz and Karen, who we had a load of staff deployed from other areas because obviously all our outpatient services had to stop. So we had a lot more staff, and that was allowed us to deliver a 7-day service with a twilight service, which meant we could take on board a huge amount of MDT staff training, some medical staff, nursing staff, further physio staff as well, to be able to provide a cohort of staff who were confident with being able to provide CPAP and have that support around them with physio who were there, who then also did an evening kind of CPAP ward round to help think about oxygen consumption on the ward and whether patients could be de-escalated to simpler devices. It felt a bit at the start like we were trying to achieve the unachievable, but physios tend to have a bit of a can-do attitude, and we got our heads down and made a plan and worked closely with Tom to get this in place, keeping patients at the heart of everything that was done. So yeah, I think the rest of the detail Tom can talk about actually. So next slide, please.
I'll ask Andy to talk a little bit now about the training and support that was put in place, not just for medical staff, but also within the ICU. An awful lot of work went in, using every spare moment whilst caring for our normal cohort of patients as well, to train nurses or ODPs from theatres who we knew we were going to have to ask to come to work with us in ICU, which is an unfamiliar area for them. But Andy was really key in trying to deliver lots of training at pace for doctors throughout the trust who aren't as familiar as critical care staff with looking after patients in respiratory distress. So thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm one of the intensive care consultants, and I'm also the Royal College Tutor for Anaesthetics. So hi to those of you who I haven't met yet. I'd just like to say before I start that Cordy was obviously key in a lot of this education process, as was Maz Downey, the ICU matron, and all the nursing staff. So I don't entirely speak for myself. Having said that, I do remember the conversation that I had with Ray Smith when we were still on one intensive care unit and the pandemic was just starting, when he said, "What I need you to do, Andy, is get all of the consultants in the hospital through a training program for a disease that we don't understand in a socially distanced fashion in 3 days. And I want you to do it in 2 days' time." And so we had to put together, so to say we did it at pace, I think probably understates it. And I think what we first need to recognise is the hugely positive aspects of this that reflect on Bradford as a trust. We contacted a couple of the senior trainees and the simulation staff, and we ran across multiple sites a programme that had over 200 consultants from across the trust, but also from community areas, so dentists, we had ophthalmologists, rheumatologists, and staff from areas such as the Yorkshire Clinic, all attend over 3 or 4 days to essentially be trained in delivering some of the aspects of care that Tom, I think, is going to elaborate on later on. So the challenges were obviously disseminating information to people and getting people engaged. So we did a YouTube video, we copied Mel's example and put that on Twitter and sent that to the trust as a whole. And we were fairly overwhelmed with the response. So we didn't actually need to try and engage anybody at all. People across the board were fantastic. And we ran several stations across 3 or 4 days, looking at essentially training senior medical staff to run wards and clinical areas outside of their normal base specialty to assist us delivering clinical care during the pandemic. And a lot of that focused around CPAP, basic medical skills, but also we were trying to impart novel information about COVID as we went along, and we were having to alter that on an almost daily basis. So the logistics were tricky. The medical upskilling of consultants, so that second title, as I said, over 200 consultants across 3 days, but also allied staff and non-medical staff across many organisations. As part of that response as well, we delivered a lot of training on intensive care. So during this time, we were trying to personally prepare ourselves for the pandemic. And so the ICU team, we're trying to develop an ICU. And along with that, we were trying to train people to deliver treatments that perhaps weren't conventional treatments, such as CPAP on wards. But as part of the ICU response, we did an awful lot of simulation on the intensive care unit in tandem with trying to prepare the ICU for the pandemic as well. Tom set up a website, and we had a lot of interaction with people nationally, and friends in other hospitals took a lot of information from many different organisations over the country. We used social media, and the multidisciplinary team approach was absolutely key in all of this. I think the credit also has to go to the 40 plus anaesthetic and critical care trainees that we had across the site. So we had to switch them onto a fairly onerous rota with 24 hours notice, and they were doing really quite difficult shifts, and we didn't have any complaints. They got involved in the training, they upskilled themselves, and they were involved in delivering really risky frontline clinical care for the whole of that beginning bit of the pandemic. I'll just finish by, I think we do have to highlight some of the ongoing issues that we face with training across the organisation. People are tired. I think trainees, but also consultants, are at risk of burnout, and delivering any sort of training when people are just trying to keep their heads above water is clearly very difficult. And so there's been a lot of focus on well-being and support. We continue to get very good feedback from trainees in terms of the pastoral support and the organisational support that we've had, and Ray has been instrumental in that as medical lead for us. And we're battling a loss of clinical activity as well, particularly across anaesthetics, and trying to get things back up and running after the pandemic. So as a reflection, I guess, of the work that people have put in over the last year or two, we'd just like to continue to support people in delivering high quality training. And I'd just like to thank everybody for their support during this time.
Thank you. Next slide, please.
So like I said, we kind of split our physio team into two halves. So the ward team focused on the wards, and then we kept a critical care team separate to that as well. And again, we had staff deployed to our team to be able to provide a 7-day service up until 8 in the morning, 9 till 9 at night, which meant that we could provide rehab sessions at a weekend, which is not something we can always do with normal staffing. And we could come back and see patients again in the evening to do further treatments and attend ward rounds evening and morning as well. Our role really on the unit was kind of supporting the MDT with non-invasive CPAP, and with a lot of nurses who were non-ICU nurses, this just gave them that bit more support, another team of people who knew about non-invasive ventilation that they could go to. Looking at different masks and interfaces, and then on the second wave we managed to identify that we could get hold of the CPAP hoods that you might have heard a lot about in the media, which were unavailable in the first wave. So we set up the introduction education with the hoods on the unit, and that's embedded now, which is great. We're also supporting the team with proning and helping with awake proning, which is something that was not really known to us prior to COVID, so that took a little bit of logistics and getting our heads around that, so it was to help everybody with that. Our normal physio input we had to rethink and modify. It was a group of patients that the likes of which we hadn't seen before, sicker than we've seen before, and normal techniques perhaps would have been more harmful than doing good, so we had to rethink really what we're doing. But one of our key roles on the unit is to help with weaning from invasive ventilation, from tracheostomies, and making sure we're getting people off ventilators in a timely manner and helping them get their voices back, which we can do while they're on ventilators and while they're weaning. And from a patient psychological and well-being point of view, once you're able to talk, that's a massive step forward. And also from a staffing point of view, once you can hear your patients say a few words, it's a big morale boost actually. A huge part of our job in normal life on ICU is to provide early rehab. We know that reduces length of stay, it reduces delirium, helps people get off ventilators quicker. However, COVID presented us with the context of new levels of breathlessness and hypoxia that we hadn't seen before, and it was having to again modify and consider things that perhaps we couldn't push these patients as much as we would like, and thinking about what we could do in the context of these things. We were really fortunate that charities money bought us a SARA Combalizer device, which is that purple chair that you'll see in the slides. That meant we can get people out of bed early on, and that's been invaluable to our care on ICU. One thing that we found really helpful for the whole team actually on the unit is feeding back to the team about how people are doing, and we can do that sort of perhaps when we're weaning people on the unit and people are starting to get out of bed, but also we're in a bit of a privileged position that we follow these patients up onto the wards or have close links with our therapy teams on the wards, and we can keep feeding back about how well people are doing, and that's been really, really helpful, I think, for everybody's well-being. Our team have actually also been able to provide, up till now really, some input into the post-COVID clinic that Paul Whitaker has been running, and that's been a really good opportunity for us to focus on some of the ICU follow-up issues that we can't normally pick up as we don't normally have a clinic, but perhaps talk about that in a little bit actually, but the COVID clinic was the other aspect of our work. Next slide, please.
So there's been an awful lot in the last 2 years that has been massively positive and a real source of pride for everybody who works in Bradford, but it would be doing people a disservice who I work with, I think, if I didn't explain how bad actually it has been. So sorry to feel a bit negative in the next couple of slides, but I think it's difficult to understand the level of support and the impact of the positives without hearing the negatives as well. So how bad did it get? So the first big wave of COVID patients came, as we all know, in the spring and to early summer of 2020. And at that time, the national response to COVID, and certainly the hospital's response to COVID appropriately, was to pretty much drop everything else and focus on this rising tide of terrible disease, which was hugely beneficial and supportive for ICU because we had incredible support, awesome support from all over the hospital. We had lots of staff coming in to work as support nursing staff to enable us to double our capacity of critically ill patients we could look after. And aside from that, we had lots of teams of different clinicians and different allied health professionals helping us in loads of different ways to support us when we started to be able to have visitors come back to the unit, to support us with turning patients prone. So that's when we turn patients onto their fronts, to nurse them on their front with all of the invasive tubes and wires and things. It's a big deal and risky for patients, and we were really appreciative of the help we had with all of those aspects of care. So the support was amazing, but we did double the amount of patients that we could look after by opening with very little notice really extra clinical areas to deliver critical care. So huge amount of complex work going on in the background as well to open and close areas to surge into at short notice. So alongside doubling our capacity, we had to double the amount of staffing we could provide. And as Tom will talk about in his talk in a moment, we had to focus carefully on how to manage a high number of patients who were critically ill, but without becoming overwhelmed as a critical care service. And a huge part of that was caring for very high numbers of patients who needed non-invasive support, so CPAP, breathing support, outside of the critical care unit. So to try and do everything we could as a critical care team to support the staff looking after those patients, we again increased our staffing levels and provided 24-hour consultant presence of consultant anaesthetists and intensive care doctors to make sure that we were there ready to help anybody who was becoming more unwell. We spent most of the time on the left of the slide. It's small, I'm sorry if you can see. We had a national scale of how to express what level of pressure intensive care units were under. And we, in the first wave, spent most of the time in CritCon 2 or 3, which are levels of workload and levels of stress for the system way beyond what would be normally expected in, let's say, a normal bad winter, for instance. So wave 1 was quite bad, and the hardest things for the staff working on the unit to deal with were the discomfort of the PPE. It was very new to us, new ways of working, problems from working in improvised areas with improvised machines. As time went on, we were very well resourced with proper intensive care equipment, but at the very beginning, we had to ventilate patients using anaesthetic machines rather than purpose-built critical care ventilators. Things like that made life more stressful. The heat, because it was summer of working in PPE. The worst thing, I think, for all of us was how to support our very distressed patients in an environment where we couldn't let their relatives come and be with them as much as we normally would. And there were really distressing times for patients and for their families and for the staff trying to care for them, particularly with trying to support patients at the end of their life. It was a devastatingly sad time for a lot of our staff, and as I'll mention later, the nursing staff really bore the brunt of those pressures. This disease was new, it was frightening. We were worried about our own health, but staff unfailingly put their own worries to one side and got on with the job. So wave 1 was pretty bad. I have to say though, wave 2, so this time last year, was worse, because by that stage it had become obvious to everybody that this wasn't going to be a short terrible problem. This is a long-term terrible problem now, and we can't just keep ignoring other things that aren't COVID that happen to people. We have to get on and treat those problems as well. So in wave 2, the whole hospital was dealing with the double pressure of how to cope with another rising tide of COVID, where in fact, as you can see from the graph, the numbers of COVID patients were worse this time last year than at the beginning of the pandemic. But alongside that, we were also trying to get as much done for patients without COVID who needed our care as well. And we recognise how disruptive we were for the rest of the hospital services when everybody dropped everything and came to help us. It wasn't possible to sustain that. Everybody had to go back to doing what they do as well as doing COVID work. So unfortunately in wave 2, we were dealing with higher still numbers of COVID patients, but without as much of the support workforce as we had before. And so at worst, in wave 2, we were in QuickCon 3 quite a lot of the time, and we were heavily dependent at this point in the pandemic on our network. So we worked closely with the other units in the network in West Yorkshire to make sure that all the units together make the best use of the resources they've got. And we did unfortunately have to move patients away from Bradford to use critical care resources close by in other hospitals to avoid anybody being in a position where there wasn't an ICU bed. And so at maximum we had 27 patients across 2 units, but that number masks the fact that we may have moved 31 other patients around the region at that point as well, and these are critically ill patients, so each one of those is a huge undertaking. So it did get quite bad. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Jump to the next slide. I'll just continue because I know what's on the next slide. So the impact, okay, I think there's a couple of slides missed out, but never mind. The impact of how bad things got was that it was stressful for the team, who had, here we go, a sustained high workload, huge levels of anxiety, and the patients that we were looking after were the sickest patients we've ever seen. And on critical care units, we're very used to seeing very ill patients, but not this ill, and not in these numbers, and not with the outcomes that we saw for these patients. Because very sadly, despite us working incredibly hard to make sure we're delivering all of the innovative treatments that we know can help this group of patients, we know that this is a deadly disease and the disease process can't be reversed in a certain number of our patients. And so unfortunately we have had high numbers of deaths, and this has been hugely distressing for families and for all of our staff. During a pandemic, when we've had to adapt what we do and work outside of what our normal processes would be and rely on the hugely valuable help of staff who aren't trained critical care nurses, the trained critical care staff have had the moral injury of seeing the effect that that work's had on their colleagues who've come to help, and they've had the moral injury of not being able to deliver the same normal care that they're used to delivering, and not being able to have family members in as much as usual to our unit has been really hurtful for staff to see the effect that that's had on patients and on families. And we've worked really hard to try and rectify that in whatever way we can, using virtual ways of communicating, using iPads, using WhatsApp calling, and doing the best we can to get family in whenever possible in the safest way for everybody. So putting it all together, we have, unfortunately, despite our best efforts to support each other and look after each other, we have got, as you would anticipate, far higher than normal levels of fatigue and stress-related illness amongst our team. And as time's gone on, the strains have been too much for some of our team, and we've unfortunately lost colleagues to other roles or to needing to take some time out before they can come back to work with us. Next slide, please. So I just want to lighten the mood a little bit now, because that's all been a bit miserable. How have we kept going through this time? And when I was putting these slides together, actually, although it's been the worst of times, there's been some incredible heart-lifting times as well. And the whole team enjoyed going back through photos and sending me pictures that reflect some of the ways we've looked after each other. So we're a family on this ICU, and we really do look after each other. We really like each other. We've got a lot of strong friendships, and our friendships and our use of humour has got us through. And you can see one of our colleagues there modelling some of the early improvised attempts at PPE we had when we were taking a slightly tongue-in-cheek approach to whether or not we'd be able to source sensible PPE or not. Christmas was really hard last year for everybody. Christmas was cancelled a little bit, wasn't it? But on the ICU, we made it Christmassy. We couldn't have normal Christmas parties and Christmas decorations, so we made Christmas scrubs. Thanks very much to Maz and the Band Sevens who organised Christmas scrubs, and my mum actually, who sewed quite a lot of them herself. We made Christmas decorations out of urine bottles and sick bowls, and did what we could to lighten the mood. Our families have been hugely supportive for all of us, and we've been worried about them, and they've kept us going. Public support at the very beginning of the pandemic was overwhelming and very much appreciated. And I do think that the public have had enough of COVID, just as we all have now. And there's a bit of a sense, I think, amongst staff in the NHS that the world's moved on and left us coping a bit with this problem. And we just want to express our gratitude for the support that's out there, and let people know that without their support, it would be even harder to keep going. Sports are very valuable. We know that they're very good for well-being, and we have a unit netball team who meet regularly and train. And there's been other walking and running challenges that staff have taken part in to use exercise as a way to strengthen mental health. Strong leadership from above us in the hospital and from all around us, and also within our team, has kept things going. And we were commended for the leadership that's there within us in Bradford. When we had a visit from NHS England, they sent in a critical care peer support wellbeing team to give us their support. And we've tried to use our leadership to support the team, to support planning and make sure that everything we can do is being done to improve how easy it is to get the work done in these conditions. The psychology team for the Trust have been absolutely incredible at supporting our staff at times when staff members have had to take time out because they've been unwell after the effects of the pandemic. And as well as providing one-to-one care for the staff, they've been providing group training sessions so that we can try and get well and then stay well, and we would be in a much worse position without them, so we thank them. And we thank our chaplaincy team who work really closely with us and are always there to support us when we're trying to look after families, and they're always there to talk to us and to really express their support for us and for our patients, and so we thank them as well. We're very grateful. And we want to thank the whole Trust who stepped up and supported us in so many different ways. And there's a photograph of one of our support staff nurses shaving heads one day to help us get our PPE to fit better. Thank you. Next slide, please. So I wanted to ask Cordy to talk to us about why we keep going. There's another slide coming up in a second. Thank you. And why we keep going and why we keep doing it all is for our patients and for the good outcomes that we get. So I want Cordy to talk to us about that side of things, please.
So absolutely, Sarah's really explained about how our team is on critical care here in Bradford, and I think we're really lucky to have that multidisciplinary working relationships and friendships as well, and that has definitely been key to how we got through. We were all very scared and anxious about this, but definitely being together has helped us get through this. Our outcomes, I think we know that COVID is a devastating disease, and we've lost a huge number of patients that we would we're used to, like Sarah said, looking after very sick patients on critical care, but not this sick. They're the sickest patients we've seen, and we've had lost a lot more than we've experienced before. So we cling on to our survivors actually, and having seeing how well these amazing humans with incredible resilience have survived this disease is just been so important to us. These group of patients have had the longest ICU and hospital stays of some patients we've had really before. So our longest ICU stay to date is 99 days, and hospital stay is about 150 days. And once these patients leave hospital, they are not the humans that they were before. They have a long rehab process and journey to follow. And we celebrate our rehab legends. So I don't know if you see on Twitter, there's a hashtag rehab legend banding around, which pre-COVID we were doing, and when our patients leave hospital, they all receive a rehab legend badge, and that's quite an emotional time for everybody involved actually, but they do like their rehab legend badges. So like I said, these patients having been through a long ICU stay is a very traumatic thing for patients and for families, and being able to follow some of them up at the post-COVID clinic has been really vital actually. It's something that we can't normally do on ICU because we don't normally have a follow-up clinic at the moment, but it's very apparent from the patients we've seen at clinic that many of them have what is termed post-intensive care syndromes. So they have a number of physical, psychological and emotional aspects, and that's a long-term thing. That might be for years after their ICU stay. And we need to think about how we can carry on supporting this group of patients and our non-COVID patients alongside this. I think we've had a lot of patients commenting and thanking us and telling us their stories, which the next slide will show a few bits of, and that's really important for the team to hear. One thing we did early on was we set up an ICU Facebook group, and being able to send photos of our survivors to that group has definitely helped many staff on the unit just see, I guess, how somebody they may not have seen since they've been sedated and ventilated on the unit, who is then walking out of hospital or standing thumbs up, is a massively important. Like Sarah said, our psychology team have been really helpful, and for staff, but also we've managed to access more support for patients and their families through them. So we've been really grateful for that as well. So if we just look at the next slide, I won't read them all out, but there's a few comments from patients and thanks. Some of the patients have shared their stories in wider areas and news channels and newspapers, Twitter, everything. But it's having that gratitude from the patients and the feedback, and being able to see how much of a difference you've made to those individual human lives. I think since first wave, we've had around 40 patients in total who have been intubated on invasive ventilation in Bradford who have survived. So they are a relatively small number of patients who have managed to survive this disease when they've got that sick. Yeah, they've They've really helped us keep going and carry on with what we're doing, knowing that our outcomes can be good.
So next slide, please. Thank you. So to round up, before we let Tom explain more about the CPAP work, the priorities now for critical care, that you shouldn't have more than one priority really, should you? But we have lots of priorities and we have a lot of challenges. So it's clear that COVID-19 isn't a short-term crisis, it's here to stay, and we need to keep abreast of all the information that comes out about research done and novel medications that can be helpful. And we're proud in Bradford that we're delivering all of the things that have an evidence base for being helpful. So we just keep adapting to the changes in the virus and the cohorts of patients that come through. And at the moment, we're particularly seeing a lot of younger patients and very distressingly lots of pregnant ladies with severe COVID disease. And we can't stress highly enough how important it is that people are vaccinated. We keep working on the way that we can manage this critical care challenge outside of the ICU as well, to make sure that we can meet the needs of COVID and non-COVID patients who need our limited resources. So we continue to support the wards who are doing tireless, grueling work to deliver CPAP to a larger number of patients outside of ICU. It's very clear now that we need to focus on CPAP as the mainstay of treatment for severe COVID pneumonitis rather than rushing to intubate patients. And it's really important that we find the best ways to explain to patients how this disease is best managed and involve them as much as possible in decisions about their care and about how they want us to manage them if their disease gets worse. And that's makes it really crucial now more than ever that we have stronger and stronger links with our palliative care team, our therapy teams, our psychology teams and our chaplaincy teams. And we continue to support relatives who are understandably frightened, anxious, very distressed by this disease, just as we all are. And unfortunately, sometimes when faced with such challenges, some of our relatives understandably express those fears and those anxieties as anger. And we need to work together with our communities and our relatives to show them how much support there is for them here, and to show them how much we care, and to help them to work with us to limit the effect really on our teams of coping with the levels of anger that sometimes are directed at us. So those are some of the challenges and some of the COVID related things. We're also got the huge backlog of elective care that we need to tackle, and critical care need to do all the work that we are required to do to support patients after major surgical procedures. We still have other diseases as well as COVID, and it's coming into winter, so we're going to have higher and higher numbers of acute medical patients. And it's important that we all work together to make the most of the resources that we have. We really want to push to develop a full-time ICU follow-up service, because we've seen again how important through COVID providing good follow-up for ICU survivors of ICU is. And we're quite excited to try and work with the virtual hospital team to see what use we can make of all those sorts of resources to provide a good follow-up service for ICU patients. It's more important than ever that we do everything we can to maintain the quality and safety standards that we have in ICU. The patients that we've got at the moment are more vulnerable than ever to hospital-acquired infections, and it's only by keeping our standards as high as possible and working meticulously with our infection control team that we can keep our safety standards as good as we want them to be. And then we've got to keep working to help our staff to recover from the last 18 months and the challenges that's presented us with, to maintain our strong team and recruit to vacancies. And as I mentioned earlier, we have unfortunately lost colleagues to other jobs or who have left through retirement or through ill health. We will have a higher than normal number of vacancies by the new year. We'll probably have 11 staff missing. We need to keep recruiting. Work's ongoing to do that. and our sickness rates are about 8 to 10%, whereas they'd normally be about 3 to 4%. So there are significant challenges to be met, and the work carries on. Thank you very much for listening. There's one more slide I think of. Oh yeah, here's our, again, end with a happy note. These are some of our rehab legends.
I just wanted to finish with these are the types of pictures that staff are seeing. Obviously some are from news channels, but we ask before the patients leave hospital that if they would like to have a photo or do a little video to say thank you to the staff that have looked after them, and that's been really powerful and really helpful, I think. With these patients have had a big impact on all of us from their experiences that they've been through. And some of you might have read the gentleman in the bottom right hand corner. Tom shared his story on Twitter. He wrote a story around the wards in 80 days. So that's Derek. And you can see how far he's come from when he was ventilated on the unit to where he was when he left hospital. So that's why we do what we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Cordy. Are we turning to Tom now? Are we hearing from Tom? Yeah.
If you think you've got time for me, then I'll try and make it brief.
We've definitely got time for you, Tom. There's nothing more important on the Board of Directors agenda, I assure you. I really do mean that. This is great. So please, you do take your time and make sure you emphasise what you would wish us to be aware of. Thank you, Tom. And good morning.
You. Yeah, good morning. So thank you. Yes, wave or blink twice if I'm making this drag on too much. Essentially, I just wanted to talk a bit about the CPAP service, which wasn't particular to critical care and was really a whole hospital response. But equally, we were heavily involved in it from critical care. And I'd like to start by sort of taking you back to before the pandemic and that kind of unknown that was coming. I mean, we all compared it to this sort of moment where the sea goes out before a tidal wave arrives, and we're just standing there on the beach wondering what the hell's about to happen. This is the model, the imperial model, that convinced the government to go into lockdown that very first time. You can see that little red line on the bottom. That is the maximum surge capacity that it was felt that the NHS could reach. And all of the other lines are what was predicted might happen if we didn't have a lockdown. Early on, we were told this virus had something like a 10% mortality rate just from catching it in the community. I mean, now we know it is much lower than that, but this was a terrifying period. I mean, both in terms of how we were going to deal with it ourselves, catching it, risking our lives, those of our families, and in terms of how we could provide any kind of healthcare to the people of Bradford with these kind of numbers being predicted. But I was immensely proud that when it came to it, despite their fears, everybody stepped up, and I thought that the first wave showed BTHFT at its absolute best. Next slide, please. So we had to very rapidly come up with ideas, and some were wackier than others, and I've left the really wacky ones off. But you can see there we brought in PPE to protect staff, and I'm really pleased, especially with what's been said at the COP26 conference up in Glasgow, that we were using reusable PPE on the unit right from day one. We were decontaminating it initially using gin and Tommy Tippy sterilisers donated by the community and by ASDA. And the story I want to get onto is CPAP kit. Now, there was a massive shortage of it. Ironically, a lot of it is produced in Italy, and there was an export ban on a lot of the CPAP kit we needed. So we were looking at 3D printing it. And we worked with Leeds University on creating new CPAP devices so that we weren't infringing on IP belonging to companies, although I was at the same time speaking to them and sort of saying, do you mind if we copy your devices and print them? And they were remarkably amenable. I mean, everybody around the country was pulling together. Next slide, please. So why CPAP? Our basic science, and Andy Baker has made me promise not to give you a lecture on respiratory physiology, suggested that it would improve outcomes. There wasn't any kind of RCT evidence or anything like that, and in fact it was initially against recommendations, but we were in complete agreement in the hospital ICU in the respiratory department that this was the approach that we wanted to take. It wasn't completely without evidence. It had been tested in Jiangsu province in China by a guy called Chin Sun and the team, and they had some very, very good outcomes, although they did combine their CPAP with bringing everyone to ICU. I spoke to people in Italy, in China and Iran who went earliest in that very, very first wave to get some of their experiences, and it was clear that CPAP was having good results, and places that tried to go for the official intubate everyone and take them to ICU approach were being very, very rapidly completely overwhelmed. We were also trying to keep our oxygen use down. You know, obviously the hospital has expanded its oxygen capacity since that first wave, but in the first wave there were genuine concerns that the pipelines to the individual wards might not be able to keep up if we had too many patients needing a lot in one place. So we couldn't completely recreate the Chin Sun approach, and we went for what we called critical care without walls. We couldn't bring everyone to ICU, so how could we bring ICU out to the wards? And this, you know, I'll be clear, this was a whole hospital effort, and I was immensely proud of how everyone stepped up. I think the one team, many talents philosophy was never better exemplified, to me at least, than what was going on here. You had procurement working overtime, medical engineering, checking bits of equipment, bringing in the CPAP devices, the sleep cubes, ward staff in A&E, MAU, respiratory, medical elderly, critical care, doctors and nurses. And particularly, next slide, please. I wanted to talk about the physiotherapists. It wouldn't be complete without mentioning them, because they stepped up really quite impressively, and they've been, you know, they were shortlisted for 2 major Health Services Journal awards for this project. It was the respiratory physios combined with musculoskeletal physios transferring over, and the reason this was so important was that these were people with CPAP experience who could step in and support the ward nurses, you know, trying to make use of our limited numbers of people who were already familiar with CPAP at that point, when they were also being asked to step up in so many other ways, wasn't, it wouldn't have worked. But the physios came in, they, you know, trained and educated, they managed the equipment, and when I went around the wards sort of saying, right, we're going to be doing CPAP on here, you know, the big question is, well, who's going to support and who's going to look after? And it was the physios that made this, they made this work by just being there, being supportive. And, you know, gradually people became more and more familiar with these bits of equipment. But at the beginning, that was the real worry. Next slide, please. So did it work? Absolutely yes. We used loads of CPAP. So on that chart, Bradford is blue. Everywhere else, you know, comparable hospitals around the UK are red. We use twice as much CPAP as anyone else, and you know, that red bar reflects quite a variety of what was going on in that first wave. Some hospitals were barely using it at all. Some hospitals were using it, you know, as much as us. But the thing that made me most proud was that absolutely everybody who could benefit from CPAP at Bradford got it. We didn't have to triage, we didn't have to restrict access to machines. If you needed CPAP at Bradford, it was available to you. And the results of using the CPAP, well, we used less than half the number of ICU beds of comparable hospitals. We used less than half the number of ventilators of comparable hospitals. Sarah's already talked and showed that, you know, that ICU did get ridiculously busy, but it could have been so much worse. And, you know, we coped, we managed, and you know, I think it's a testament to the amount of extra work that was going on the wards and people supporting, you know, this relatively novel way of working that managed to, you know, keep ICU under control. And next slide, please. Of course, it's one thing to say, well, did we avoid overwhelming ICU, but did this have benefit to the patients as well? And the answer is yes. We had a lower mortality, despite we know that the population of Bradford, and you know, we've demonstrated it in our paper, the population of Bradford is generally sicker than in other places around the country. And I think we really demonstrated successful transfer of what they've done in Jiangsu into an NHS model of care, and the fact that this critical care without walls approach meant that we could have the benefits of this CPAP without necessarily having to bring everyone onto the unit. Next slide, please. So what have we done since then? Well, we tried to shout loud and proud about what Bradford had done. It was clearly mentioned on the BBC and in other press. We wrote an article after that first wave, which has been shared very widely, read many times, and a lot of hospitals copied our approach for the second and subsequent waves. I mean, clearly some were doing it already, so there was a growth of knowledge around CPAP. The hospitals that have been sort of waiting for an RCT have now finally been convinced. So Recovery RS reported in August 2021. Now, it's obviously over a year later, which interestingly reported almost exactly the same results that we'd had in that very, very first wave, in terms of it massively reducing your use of critical care and with a slight mortality benefit as well. And it's now the standard treatment for COVID-19 pneumonitis is getting people onto CPAP. So it's been really edifying throughout the pandemic that every time new evidence has arrived and someone said to me, well, what does Bradford need to do about this? I've been able to say, well, we're already doing it. That makes my life a lot easier. And even the random 3D printing efforts right at the very start haven't gone to waste. So that collaboration with Leeds University has resulted in the development of a new CPAP system called the LEVE system, which, as you can see in the photo there, is currently actually in use in Uganda. We sent it over there to try and set up a trial, which is now going ahead. But actually, as we sent over the first devices, Uganda had a massive outbreak of COVID. And they ended up just starting to use it, and they've done some incredible things over there with CPAP and really limited resources, and a CPAP machine that was developed by this collaboration between Leeds and Bradford. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Should I return to Hsg and just ask whether there was anything you would wish to say in conclusion there?
Thanks very much. I think the team here have probably given everybody a really good flavour of what was involved. So I don't personally have anything else to add, and I'd like to hand it over to the floor for any questions, please. Fantastic.
Thank you, Hsg. Well, it's right then that I begin by sincerely thanking a fantastic team for a fantastic briefing, actually. Absolutely superb. So insightful. Thank you very much. So Cordy, Sarah, Andy, Tom, and I do know there are other members of the team on the call. Thank you so much for the insight and understanding that you've brought. If I may say, I was particularly impressed by the ethos of adaptation, the necessary adaptation you had to take, and I was particularly influenced as well by the underlying stress that's obviously been there. And so when I think Sarah pointed out at the beginning about how right at the beginning of this pandemic, it was about, are we going to survive this ourselves, and are we going to take something home to others? So that was so powerful, absolutely brilliant. And may I also say, I don't know, I'm chairman, I'm hogging it a little bit here, but may I also say that we only have 5 strategic objectives. The first of those is to provide outstanding care for all our patients. And it's rare that we get a better example of a team of people who are trying to do that. So it was absolutely terrific. Thank you. I will now open up for questions and comments and thoughts, and I'll go in the order. I think that hands went up. So Ray, if I could turn to you first, please.
Thanks, Max. I'll keep it very brief, but just to say again, thank you for the team for the presentation today, but more importantly for all the work that they've done. I hope you've all got a flavour of what's been going on. But I think I just want to stress again the scale of the mobilisation that went on and the speed of the mobilisation, all the training that happened. So actually, when we had our first patient, we were there, sat ready and waiting for it. And I think a lot of other organisations, in fact, I think most of the organisations were not in that position. We were absolutely ready for our first patient. And I think if you look at the regional data, the statistics about ICU occupancy and numbers, it just does not tell the story of what was happening in Bradford, because we had wards full of patients that in nearly every other hospital they would have been on the intensive care unit, and our ICU team were working with the ward staff to keep those patients alive, safe on the wards. So the data, the stats in terms of the numbers we had through just do not tell the story accurately. The scale of it is well beyond anything I've seen. I think beyond anything any of us have seen. So I'll stop there. But again, just profound thanks to everybody.
Thank you, Ray. And I could see there was significant agreement around the virtual table with the points you were making. Thank you. Mohammed, may I bring you in, please?
Thank you, Max. Can I just thank colleagues who've given us an update? And Max, thank you to you as well for giving this the time I think that it needed for us to listen. And I think that was really great. A bit of a question, I think, for you, Tom, really. I know you and colleagues have been kind of, steadfastly focused on data-driven care, and you've been really strong on identifying COVID is airborne. And I know at Bradford, we've been ahead of the curve in terms of many places, in terms of the actions we've taken. What more do you think we could do to kind of manage and respond to that COVID is airborne?
I think the key things that appear to be coming out are protecting staff, and I'm very pleased that Bradford has moved to using FFP3 masks in all COVID red zones, and I think we're one of it's now 17 trusts in the UK that are doing that, which is above and beyond the minimum regulations of PHE, which I won't dwell on. There's ventilation, and there's a lot of expertise around ventilation in the area. Professor Kath Noakes is obviously local and provide a lot of guidance on what we can do. But essentially, it's about replacing the stale air that might have COVID in it with clean air coming from outside. And there's more data coming out now around filtration. People, I think Cambridge University Hospitals Trust is installing HEPA filters on their wards and testing those. And I think that needs to be done in conjunction with an assessment of how the ventilation on the wards is. I mean, if you can ventilate a ward, the ICU is brand new, it's been well built and designed around ventilation, but some of the older estate, you may not be able to ventilate quite so effectively. So that's when filtration really becomes important. So I think looking around the estate and assessing that and bringing in ventilation or filtration as necessary would be where I'd go.
Thank you, Tom. That may be a follow-up perhaps with you, Mark, at some point, just in terms of that filtration and testing piece. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Mohammed. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, Julie, would you like to come in, please?
Just to say, I sit here in awe of you all. I remember the fear at the start of the pandemic, and the fact you were going into work every day and facing this, as a board, is a great thanks. It almost makes you emotional talking about it. I think the work you did aligned to our values. Max talked about the objectives. We look at our values as a trust, and in that presentation and the work you've done, the true values of the trust, we're one team, we listen, we care, just shone through. The remark from Cody about hearing a patient's voice after being intubated, the fact that it matters to our team. Of course it matters to the family, but the fact it matters to the team, really powerful. I think we as a board need to think about, you talked about the workforce issues, so you talk about people being tired, the teams being tired, the numbers of vacancies. I think it's really important for us as a board to look at the workforce issues and remember the kind of bringing back to a team the number of vacancies. What do we do about our workforce? What do we do about sickness levels? How do we try to support our tired teams? And just to say, any awards we get, how justly deserved. So thanks, everybody. Really powerful presentation to listen to. Thank you.
Well said, Julie. Thank you. Yes. And John, would you like to come in, please?
Thanks, Max. Yeah, I won't repeat what the people have said, but I would like to reinforce it. I think it was an incredibly powerful presentation, and other than what I've put in the chat, what I get out of it, I think, was the sense of balance that was in there about the achievements, but also the challenges that were there at the start and are there now. I just wanted to expand a little bit on this issue of a sense of team, and just expand on what Julie said, really, because I'm really interested in how this sense of team in such a challenging environment has been created and sustained, and I'd be interested to try and learn from that for other parts of the hospital. So that's my first question, how we can do that. And my second question is, given that there's a fairly high level of turnover and sickness, how are we going to maintain or indeed improve on that sense of team in the future, given that there will be some challenges given changes in personnel, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Yes. Rishi, should I perhaps turn to you first, please, as to what would, if there was a single thing you wanted to bring to our attention in terms of team building, what would you bring to our attention, please, that we might learn from?
Yeah, so I was actually going to pass this over to Sarah, so she was going to answer that question.
I think as a team, we make a lot of time and space to work really closely together. We are a proper integrated multidisciplinary team at every level. The doctors and the nurses and the allied health professionals, particularly the physio team, we work closely together, whether that's day-to-day operational things or whether that's planning for the future. So just reinforcing time and again really close links, really open communication. We like each other. I think that really helps. I think what else?
From an allied health profession point of view, often we're very much on the outskirts of what goes on in certain areas, and I feel like definitely compared to other ICUs as well, we're very much embedded as physios in the ICU team, and that was pre-COVID as well. So I think strong links pre-COVID have definitely been reinforced and exaggerated during the pandemic. I think on other areas, because of how allied professions work, we're quite nomadic and we go around lots of different areas, so you're not kind of seen as particularly part of the team, and maybe that's something in the future we need to think about, is people knowing each other's names, people working together closely and knowing everybody's roles and being valued as well, and opinions valued and listened to.
Yes, stuff. Thank you, Sarah and Cordy. Sorry, Rishi, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to add to Sarah and Cordy and just say that as I don't do intensive care, but I can see within the intensive care team, it's an extremely cohesive team. And I think facing the global pandemic is in some ways has brought the team even closer together. And on the background that the anaesthetic department as a whole is generally very close, despite the stresses that have occurred over the past 18 months. And when you go on to the intensive care unit as somebody that doesn't do intensive care, you can see clearly how the likes of Cordy and input from the nursing staff, their opinions are valued by the medical staff, and that is really clear.
Yeah, thank you.
So,
thanks. Yeah, go on, Sarah. Yeah.
Keep those links strong in a number of different ways, informal ways, bake sales, the sports stuff, when public health conditions allow, socializing outside of work, but also in work. There's regular meetings between myself and Maz, the matron, and Wendy, our deputy matron, to make sure that we're all aligned and we're all working together all of the time. Compared to different units within the network, it was telling that when there were capacity issues or trying to work out where the hell's the next bed coming from, we would always work together as medics and nurses. And in other units, that wasn't happening so much. It would either be a doctor trying to sort it out or a nurse trying to sort it out, rather than the team trying to sort it out. So I think those are the kinds of things that are key. And moving forward in terms of supporting wellbeing, we have a lot of excellent resources available. What we now need to do is build in time while the workload is still so high to let people access those resources and those training courses and things like that. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sarah, Cordy, Rishi. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Please do know this is not, of course, a test. This is a genuine interest on our part, and as to how we can advocate and promote the things we are learning, listening to you. So that's what this is about. Thank you. Janet, shall I bring you in, please?
Thank you so much, and I can only echo everyone else's praise because it is outstanding. And the old adage, people who play together stay together, is really ringing true here, isn't it? And I've had the privilege of working in teams that really, really respect each other's component parts, and it works, particularly when you work intensively together, not necessarily intensive care, that sometimes it doesn't work. So it's all hats off to you guys, really, in my view. So my question was, it relates to Julie's about the workforce, and some of it is about the gap between the pipeline that's coming because they're inspired by what's been happening, and your immediate needs because people have burnt out, you know, and gone on to do different things. So clearly that's a huge challenge. And I just wondered if there was or people were thinking about different types of roles within the current system, not necessarily preparing for a pandemic, but it's an opportunity to rethink some of our specialist roles across the workforce, you know, be it doctors, nurses or AHPs, that ongoing would be of value, so that we may use ICU and existing wards maybe slightly differently, because the goal is to have less people in hospital, and those that are there will be, you know, obviously need to be there. So the lessons learned are far-reaching, aren't they? But that doesn't solve your immediate staff problem that's clearly on the agenda that we need to help with. So in some ways it's praise and comment.
Yes, no, thank you, Janet. Yes, and I should perhaps just offer Rishi or the team an opportunity to comment on that point about rethinking colleague roles. Sarah, did you want to come in?
Yeah. I mean, so I don't profess to be an expert in training and education. I'm just a clinician, but we do talk a lot amongst ourselves, and particularly with our matron and our deputy matron, about how we can best use our resource and how we can best develop our resource. And there's a lot of interest in whether we can look at developing our healthcare role to become more of a nurse associate role, and really use the skills that those people have, but that would need to have the right plan for development and remuneration with it. How we can use the fabulous resource that is our ODP workforce, and whether we could look in the future at having a rotational workforce that maintains skills across not only ICU but ICU recovery and theatres. At the moment we're lucky that we've managed to give some of our burnt out ICU staff some time to try a different role within theatres recovery, and that's beneficial to them because it's a different role. It's allowing them to be in work but not still being bombarded by the same everyday pressures that they've been used to. So lots of different innovative ways of working are being thought about all the time.
Thank you. That's extremely helpful, Sarah. Thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Janet. Stephanie, good morning. Would you like to have a word?
Hi, thanks, Max. I just wanted to say I found it really emotional from a personal perspective, especially how you were all supporting each other. I feel a bit emotional just saying that out loud. So just a personal thank you for all of the hard work that you did. I guess mine's a broader question of, if the board could grant you one wish now, because we'd like to say COVID was gone, it's not going to be, there will be future waves. What would that wish be, and to see if we could help?
There you go. Maybe we're back to that priorities now for critical care slide. That would there be one thing that maybe comes immediately to mind? Sarah, Andy, what do you think? Or Tom, indeed.
I've probably got about 5 or 6 things. But, there's what we would like to have, and then there's what's deliverable. This isn't just about money or finance, or this is about people and whether the skills are even out there, whether we've got enough people who could come and immediately fix problems that we've got. I'm not sure that we can fix all these problems immediately, but some things, the things that are really important are ICU follow-up. We don't have any regular ICU follow-up provision at the moment, and we do need to fix that. We have had incredible support from the psychology team, but at the moment that support is funded mainly for supporting staff, which is hugely important and massively valuable. But we need to expand that support so that we can offer that regular service for patients and their families as well. And then we need to use the resources that we've got and be able to expand them to meet all the demand for critical care that's within the trust. So not just for COVID, but also for expanding numbers of patients who need care post-surgery, so particularly vascular surgery, essentially we're doing more and more work, and we need to be able to find innovative ways to expand to use that. And I know there'll be potentially eye rolling because I'm always banging on about it. We need to look at perioperative medicine services and the best way of using a fantastic new facility that we've got on Ward 10.
Fantastic, fantastic, great answer, great answer. And we'd realised there's more as well on the priority slide as well. So Steph, thank you for the points there. A terrific answer that brought insight to us all. Thank you. Ray, should we make this final comments then for this now? Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, just picking up on the discussion around workforce, I think it's incredibly important. We've always, everywhere really, not just Bradford, has had a very traditional approach to caring for patients, one which relied heavily on junior doctors to provide that care. It's obvious that we need to move away from that model now. Medical training is changing. We need to build a sustainable workforce which doesn't rotate around and actually knows the organisation. So use of those allied health professionals, physicians associates, clinical nurse specialists, we've got to think differently. So I completely acknowledge what was said around having to think differently about our workforce and building a workforce which really is fit for the future. So yeah, that's going to be important work for us.
Thank you very much indeed, Ray. Thank you. Well, look, I'll close this session now. Thank you to Mohammed, who made an early comment endorsing me for letting things run there, of course, because that was an absolutely terrific session. The amount of insight we got from that genuinely was huge. And of course, some of our exec colleagues may be more normally sighted on what's going on, but to bring it to the attention of the whole board was great for us. So I'm certainly not suggesting the NEDs are not cited. You know the point I'm making, that we can't possibly get a feel of daily work, etc. So it's quite difficult. So what terrific insight, brilliant presentation. And I will finish, in the absence of any further comment, and Ray helpfully pulled things together there, by expressing on behalf of the board of directors our sincere thanks for everything you do. It was a serious point I made as we moved into the questions and comments, that we have a single strategic objective to provide outstanding care for all our patients. And what a brilliant example we've heard today. And the learning we've had from that has been terrific. So may I thank you for all input, promise you that everything we've heard will influence the way in which we're thinking and the decision making we have to do. And we've learnt a lot from that. Rishi, is that okay? May I turn to you to close?
Yes, thanks very much, Max. Again, I'd just like to thank the board for giving us the opportunity to talk about our CBU today. And yeah, I'll probably leave it there. Thank you very much.
Yes, fantastic session. Thank you so much indeed. And I do recognise that our other CBU colleagues here as well. So thank you to you all for everything you do. Okay. Thanks all. Thank Lovely to see you all. Yeah. Thanks for the input. Andy, Tom as well. Great stuff. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, colleagues. That was so powerful, wasn't it? And I do realise, of course, we've run over. I'll find ways to try and draw that back. But incredible, wasn't it? Absolutely incredible input. Okay. And we need to build in breaks so that we're giving everybody the energy that we would wish to. So. Really, really powerful. Ray, well done to that team. It's such an insight, such a fantastic insight. Great stuff. Okay, may I move us straight away then to item 4, please, and ask whether the minutes provided for the 23rd of September are considered a true record of that board meeting. 23rd of September minutes. Are there any matters of inaccuracy or amendment that we should note? None brought to my attention. No, that's great. Okay, thank you. We endorse those as a true record. There are 3 actions arising, 2 of which are actually for January anyway, the mental health strategy and the patient recruitment centre. And I'm assured by the notes there that those things are indeed underway. And for the maternity services update, we note that the meeting did in fact take place. Sarah and John were going to meet before the next Safety Champions meeting. And according to the notes we have, that took place on the 5th of November. So unless anybody wants to point up to me that there's something not right there, may I take it that we are satisfied that the actions are being pursued as they should? I think so. Thanks very much indeed. Item 6 is the chairman's report. I'll resist the temptation to hog any more of your time, of course, as chairman, but hopefully people have had the chance to see that. I will, if I may, just emphasise the first point about Kavita. So Kavita's been a terrific governor. She's stepping down because of the additional duties that she'll be taking on as our clinical lead for Get It Right First Time. And we just know she'll be great at that, don't we? An already experienced clinician who spent a year or so with us as a governor. Well, that's great insight. And so I just want to thank Kavita and congratulate her on her appointment as the clinical lead for Getting It Right First Time. That's great stuff. Okay. And my only other point I may have raised with you, which I'll do very briefly, is to commend the governors for their recent insight and interest and useful conversations and questions. The last Council of Governors meeting, which only took place recently, was a really good example. Great early conversation with non-exec directors, indeed, that I think raised 5 HR-related questions that Pat Campbell had about 2 minutes to prepare for and did a brilliant job of informing the governors of just where we were on those points. As you might expect, of course, the non-exec directors try to answer in the detail that governors would require, but it's great when we can turn to an exec director and say, did we get this right? So thank you, Pat, for what you did there, but may I commend the governors for their interest and good questioning skills. They're carrying out the role extremely well. Thank you. If there are no questions, John, would you like to come in? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Max. I know we're pushed for time, so we'll be very quick.
That's okay.
I just wanted to expand on the meeting on the 5th of November with Sarah because as maternity champion, I did go onto all the maternity wards as well, including neonatal. And I can assure all the rest of my non-executive colleagues that I was absolutely amazed, really, by the level of commitment, the level of work, the level of professionalism. And what I'm trying to do is open up a connection between non-executives and staff if they've got anything they want to raise direct with us as a communication link. But I don't think it's necessary for anyone else to see it, given the pressure of the work in there. But they can take it from me that I was dumbfounded by the level of commitment and professionalism in there. And I had a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Fantastic. That's great. Thank you very much indeed, John. That's extremely helpful. Thank you. Okay. And so I'll assume that you're content to note my report in the absence of any further questions. And I'll turn to Saj to ask whether there's anything chief executive related in your role as deputy chief exec, Saj. John is going to brief the board later on some further items. Just an opportunity, if you wanted, Saj, to bring us up to date with performance or COVID-related issues, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and I'll keep this really brief in terms of just COVID pressure. As you say, John will pick up the rest of the elements in his update. You've obviously heard from the ICU team earlier, such a powerful presentation this morning. But COVID is still a reality for us. It's still here, and we've still got patients in the hospital bed base with COVID. Just to give you a flavour of that, since March last year, we've not had a single period, not one day, where we haven't had COVID patients in our bed base. And at the moment, we've got somewhere in the region of 40 to 45 patients in our bed base. During the end of October, we were up to about 75 patients COVID positive in our bed base. So we've got 2 wards open and some patients on ICU as well. So that is the level of pressure that we are facing as an organisation. And of course, board members will have seen the significant press coverage nationally around the pressure that hospitals, ambulance services, etc. find themselves under, the whole NHS, in fact, finds itself under currently. And that's a combination of things there. That is the normal urgent emergency care pressure that arises as a result of the winter load that we experience, the COVID demand that we're experiencing, and lastly, our desire to restart and recover elective services as well. So all of those competing priorities having an impact there nationally. You'll see through the performance report and the finance report that Julie's going to give our relative position there. So I'm not going to go into that, but just to highlight the fact that we are finding our emergency department is busier than where we would have been, let's say, a year and a half to 2 years ago. So a year and a half to 2 years ago, we would average on any given day approximately 340 attendances coming through our A&E. And at the moment, we're about 400, routinely 400 attendances plus on average per day. So that's just to put into context the environment that we are operating in when we are listening and hearing about all of the different services that we operate, or all of the reports that we're going to hear from each of the academies. It's just important to recognise that that's the level of pressure that exists within the hospital. So I think I'll leave it there, Chair, if that's okay, and I'm sure we'll pick up the detail as we go through each of the academy reports.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarge. Thank you. May I ask whether there were any particular questions to Sarge related to those points? I think we're helped by the detail and the data that we do get, aren't we? So, Sarge, thank you very much indeed. Julie, may I suggest that we move to quality first? I'll tell you why I'm thinking that, because of course we do have visitors to board who are going to be participating in the briefings tours with Sarah, with the patient safety specialist, and of course John Wright is joining us at I think 11:30, isn't it? So if I might suggest that we move straight to quality. Sarge, I realise that might cause some difficulties for you, but hopefully we can pick up as we go. And pick up what we need to do. At least we do, of course, have Julie here and Matthew for finance and performance. So given that we do have colleagues joining us for these things, let's move straight to quality. We will, of course, come back to finance and performance, but we'll turn to Mohammed, if I may. Mohammed, I'm sorry if I put you out the queue to there with the orders. But maybe, obviously, we're assisted by your report, Mohammed, and we're going to go into an update from Sarah. But may I ask whether there's anything you would wish to emphasise from the Chair's report of quality and patient safety, please?
Thank you, Max. Absolutely, there's lots happening in the Quality Academy, and I think it's really useful for us to have a bit of a walk through the report. I mean, there's I think a late submission of the report as well. I think you should have 2 reports in the bundle, one from the previous month in September and one from October. I'll try and pick out what I think are some of the kind of salient highlights, key issues from the Quality Academy in October. We had a fantastic presentation, similar, I guess, in many ways to the critical care CVU update we've had this morning to the board. We had an update from the urgent emergency care team, and similar to this morning, it took over a substantial part of the agenda, although it wasn't planned to, simply because the input and the discussion that it triggered was so valuable and so rich in discussion. We understood the demand on urgent emergency care. We heard a lot about the data that we've got across Wyatt. We also noted that just the impact on the demand in terms of external services, GPs, Yorkshire Ambulance Service, and how everything kind of links together, and that pushes the demand onto accident and emergency. We also heard from the team specifically around workforce. So again, we heard that similarly from this morning, and we had the same challenge and the same kind of biggest risk from the urgent emergency care team. We did ask the team to come back to us later. There were some really good discussions, I think, challenges. Karen Dauber in particular, I think, asked a really fantastic question and a peer challenge in the academy. And one of the things that I'm really trying to encourage in the Quality Academy is that we don't run it as a board, that we run it as an academy. So there's kind of peer challenge and peer learning as well. And so we've got more of that kind of peer discussion within the academy. And I want to thank Karen for the really good question she asked of the colleagues from urgent emergency care, and they're going to go away and work on responses to that and come back. So we're trying to engender a way of working, which means that we get to revisit areas on a reasonably frequent basis, kind of managing all the areas that we do need to cover. Maternity services, I won't touch on that because I know we've got an update coming further in the agenda. Just to note that we have had a further 5 stillbirths in September. There's an investigation ongoing, and Sarah will I'm sure kind of address that in her update. we're doing a fair bit of work around a new quality improvement platform called Live QI. We had a presentation on that from the team and how that's working. We were kind of assured to see this new platform and how it's going to develop. We had some early metrics in terms of uptake. We did put a challenge into the team as to, this is great to see kind of uptake in users, but can you show us how this is going to impact and improve quality? And that's going to be an ongoing challenge. I mean, very early days for the Live QI platform. It's probably slightly unfair to expect them to be able to demonstrate the outcome so early, but we wanted to put that marker down quite early to them to say that we're well, we're happy to have the metrics around users, but we were really interested in metrics around quality improvement, and that's a challenge for them to be able to give us that update in due course. We had a patient safety strategy update, and again, I think it's in the agenda for this afternoon today, so I won't cover that in any detail. It's all in the report. We did hear about electronic prescribing for discharge patients is under review, and we've got a medicine safety officer, and just particularly around the medicine safety officer, it won't surprise you, Max and fellow members of the board, that as a pharmacist I was particularly interested in this role. I was very keen to hear from the medicine safety officer at the Quality Academy, so that's something that we're going to pick up when that person is in post and they're settled in. I'm really keen to hear from them as to what the challenges are around medicines and medicine safety in particular, because medicines are they're the single biggest intervention we make in the NHS, and so it's so important that we get the medicine safety right, and I want to hear much more about that. Let's have a look what else I wanted to cover off. We had assurance within the committee in terms of within the academy with an update on a patient experience group, including complaints and parliamentary health service ombudsman report. There was an excellent kind of analysis of complaint themes, and actually one of the things we took away from that is that certainly from my perspective as chair of that academy, I wanted to see a similar analysis in terms of lessons learned and incidents, because I felt the complaints and the way we analyse them is really excellent, and I recognise there's some real challenges around getting a similar kind of analysis for incidents, but we're going to look at that and see how can we replicate the way of presenting that data, the way of kind of theming it in terms of areas for incidents as well. We did note the absolutely fantastic work that the team have done during COVID around the relatives line, and that now this is going to be a permanent trust feature. Again, it just goes to show that there are some positives that have come out of COVID as well. Not that we would have wished COVID to have happened, but since it has happened, there are changes that we have made that are positive changes, and some of those we can retain, and I think that's the right thing to do. We did note, however, that the published inpatient survey, the results were disappointing. We did recognise that they were taken in a particular moment in time, and we think we've improved since that moment, and there's other ongoing work that perhaps will show us where we are more recently than when the inpatient survey was taken. I think the inpatient survey was taken autumn 2020, so it's kind of second COVID peak, so that kind of naturally perhaps affected the experience that patients may well have had for a variety of reasons. We had a really good presentation from the Infection Prevention and Control Board Assurance Framework. In fact, it was so good in terms of the way it was presented to us and the ethos of quality improvement that I'd asked for it to be shared more widely with all the academies, with the other two academies as well, as something that I want to see more of as an example of what I think is excellence. I think Judith and Liz kind of pulled that slide deck together, and I had a call with them yesterday, and I just wanted to thank them again for, I think they just hit the right kind of balance and right tone in terms of quality improvement. So that was excellent, and I have asked for that to be shared, and I think it's been shared with the board as well as an example of quality improvement, something we'd like to see more of. And we also went through the SI serious incident reports, and I wanted to provide kind of assurance to the board that as an academy, we have looked at serious incidents, and we are continuing to identify, investigate, improve and learn, and continue to evolve the way that we learn from SIs. We did have a look at the strategic risks. They're in the report. There was one outstanding one from the report in September around the telephony system. We now know that we noted in October that had now completed successfully, and that's fantastic. Interestingly, based on the discussion we just had this morning, we also had a look around ventilation in the theatre ventilation programme, and that's obviously a risk, but we recognise significant work is underway to kind of address that. And we also recognise that with our estate, there's some challenges around ventilation that will be long-term challenges, but we felt the risks were being appropriately managed. In terms of the Quality and Patient Safety Academy dashboard, we see this as a bit of a longer-term project. We just recognise that the dashboard perhaps wasn't quite hitting the right markers for us and the right tone for us and the right areas. We have set up an academy development session in February the 18th. I believe invitations will be going out to all of the NEDs as well to attend that session if they're able to. And we're going to have a half-day session looking at what is it that we're trying to do with the Quality Academy and bringing everyone onto the same page in terms of what we understand by quality and quality improvement. And then the second half of that session is going to be looking particularly around the way that we're working, what's our work plan, are we trying to do too much in the Quality Academy, does something belong elsewhere, and are there other ways that we can work? For example, one of the suggestions we discussed in terms of our planning has been, could we potentially have a kind of a Quality Academy away day every 6 months where we invite CBUs to present to other CBUs what they're doing in terms of quality improvement. So those areas that have got a really good story to tell and really good approach, they can share that with others, and CBU areas can learn from one another. And I think that will also help us in terms of managing our agenda, because it's such a big agenda, trying to get through it every month, both in terms of lessons learned, quality improvement and assurance. It's just really challenging. And I wanted to let the board know that we have extended the time for the meeting. I think we've extended it by half an hour, just to give us that bit of extra time in the meeting to try and get through our agenda and give time for discussion and debate, because we're keen that it's not just a mini board. We're keen that it's about quality improvement and learning. We had an update in terms of Safeguarding Children quarterly report, and this just highlighted for us the real challenges around mental health crisis, and it's on our risk register, and we had a really good update on this. And there was I think on the slides there was a comment that the team, wanted continued support from the trust, and as an academy we kind of probed that a bit further. So what do you, what exactly do you mean? What more do you need from us? And there was some feedback in terms of we could do more support around kind of elevating cases with legal support, perhaps, particularly around kind of safeguarding children and just those kind of areas that sometimes that can be a delay in terms of getting the most appropriate care. And perhaps we need to have more of a look at that and see how best we can support the teams involved, just making sure that they're kind of expediting the correct pathways as early as possible. There were no matters to escalate to the board other than the infection control kind of quality that I thought was excellent, that we've referred to the board. And I think that's about kind of covers it. There's probably a lot in there, Chair and members of the board, but I think other items that I haven't covered are probably going to be on the agenda anyway, so I'll probably pause there and take any questions.
That was really comprehensive. Thank you, Mohammed, and thank you for reminding us of the quality of the infection control data that was provided to you and shared. And may I commend the 3 academy chairs for their work in getting together in order to share learning between the academies and look at ways in which we can all develop together. Great stuff. May I ask whether there are any questions or further comments in relation to the chair's reports that Mohammed's helpfully gone through for us there? There's plenty on the agenda, I realise, and so if there's nothing that arises amongst directors, just check. That's great. Okay, and thank you, Mohammed. Shall we turn to Karen and to Sarah then, please, to take the maternity services update? There's a significant number of data attachments, of course, have been circulated amongst directors and the covering reports. So Karen and Sarah, if I may, maybe try to be as succinct as we need to be here. I certainly don't want to resist any hearing anything that we should, but if we can be as pragmatic as we can, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We're going to be very succinct. So Sarah has a couple of things that board needs to approve, which she will take us through. They are in the bundle of the documents. Sarah's also going to going to comment on the stillbirth increase in August and September, which Mohammed touched on in his report also. But also I would like to congratulate Sarah Hollins and Alison Powell for receiving a gold for Sarah and a silver for Alison Chief Midwifery Officer Award, which is very prestigious and very well done, and is because of the work that they have both been doing with the team to improve our maternity services. So well done. Over
Well
to
said,
Sarah.
Karen. Thank you. Well said. Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Karen. Okay, so yeah, Max, you did say there's a lot of papers attached. So firstly, just to say that the September paper bundle was presented to Quality Academy in October and all the recommendations were approved and agreed. So it essentially is just for board to note the contents, and I'm taking that as that report and all the relevant appendices as read. So the October report is quite a brief one this month, and I'm really pleased to report that actually we've had a month of low harms, despite a backdrop of ongoing staffing pressures and high activity. So I think that's certainly something to be celebrating. So really briefly, in summary, we have had one stillbirth, which is described in the paper, and that case also met the Hsg reporting as an SI, but that is the only incident that's needed escalating in this month period. All other neonatal deaths, etc., came in as a 0, no HIEs, etc. So that was really positive. There were some immediate lessons learned from that particular case, which are also described within the paper itself. But overall, there was actually quite a lot of good care that was recommended, that was noted there too. Touching on what Karen said about the and also Mohammed speaking about the increase in stillbirths in August and September. We have indeed looked at those as two separate clusters of 5, but we've also brought those two together and looked at them as a 10 and actually pulled out some similarities, or certainly a few issues that we are going to be looking at in more detail. That's going to be presented at our next specialty meeting, and I'll provide that update to the next Quality Academy when we've had an opportunity to look at that. We're also feeding that information into some of our local maternity system and our regional groups as well, because I think we weren't in isolation. We have seen an increase in the region during the last few months, but pleased to say, overall, if you look at the dashboard, which is attached as an appendices as well, you'll see that our rolling total for stillbirths in 2021 is actually taking a very nice downward trajectory, and actually compared to this point in time last year when our birth rate was lower as well, we're actually doing significantly better. So we are keeping fingers crossed that that continues for the remainder of the year. From a Safety Champion perspective, I just really want to formally welcome John now. He attended his first meeting in his role as NED Safety Champion, and we've had positive feedback both from that meeting, and as I can confirm, we did walk the unit on the 5th. One of the main things that was discussed at the last safety meeting was around the ATTAIN, which is avoiding term admissions into neonatal unit. An update was provided. There was a quarterly report provided by our neonatology safety champion, and she also shared the action plan which is required for the maternity incentive scheme. So you will see that as an appendix. That's number 3 for the October bundle, and I would just like board to sign that off. It has been discussed with the safety champions who are in agreement. There are a couple of red areas on there, but we anticipate that they will be very rapidly turned to amber, regarding appointing additional safety champions and things like that actually into the ATTAIN work stream. So that was the first request. The progress of that action plan will be monitored through the safety champion meetings and also through the LMS ATTAIN action group. So there's a lot of assurance around the progress on that too. And then the final thing that I've got to say today is just to ask for final sign-off for Appendix 5, which is the MSDS action plan. Again, that has been reviewed by the digital leads and relates to the last year's maternity incentive scheme submission. The local maternity system required that update in November, and it's a little bit historic now. We've superseded it with the Year 4 standards, but it did still need to go through the process. So I think there's been assurance from the digital, from Paul Rice and certainly from Paul Southern, that that's fine. So it was just for a final board stamp of approval. And that's it. I don't think I've ever rattled through it so quickly before. So I'm happy to take any questions on either the either the September information that was provided or from October.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So, Sarah, just remind me what the second issue was that required board approval. I've got the Attain Action Plan. What was the second one?
The Maternity Services Data Set Action Plan.
The Data Set Action Plan, which can be found at?
That's Appendix 5.
5, yes. Yeah. That's great. So we've got Appendix 3 and Appendix 5, haven't we? The ones that approval are being sought for. Great stuff.
Yes,
okay.
please.
So in that spirit, may I open up to ask whether there are any questions? So thank you to Sarah, and many congratulations, Sarah, from the board on your award. That's terrific. Well done. Well done. And I think a reflection of the whole team that you created there as well, isn't it? So very well done. May I ask whether there are any questions, queries, further detail required? Terrific set of papers, of course, that we've all had, as long as people can get the time to read them through. But let's open up for any questions, and in the context as well, please, of approval being sought for the two things at Appendix 3 and Appendix 5. Janet, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you, and massive congratulations to your awards. That is, obviously impressive, and we're very proud of you and the team. And I'd just like to also applaud you for very detailed, transparent and clear reporting. Abbreviations all explained for the whole board, and not holding back from being open and honest about where things might have gone wrong and where improvements have been made, because it's really important that we behave in that way. So well done to everybody. So it was also reassuring what you were just saying about some of the red risks in some of the appendices, and that there's new appointments, and there's obviously activity in hand to turn some of in the Attain into amber. And so that, and I did read it, and you've reconfirmed. So that is absolutely excellent. Thank you very much. And you've also identified an update about the Ockenden reassurance assurance as evidence, and you flagged, I'll get there in a minute, positives around immediate staffing, but some risk towards that, meeting the continuity of care staffing levels. And at some point, because of the nature of the metrics you're having to report on, the community-ness, which is a huge part of your portfolio, I think gets lost. And maybe that at some point the board would appreciate hearing the risks that may bring in terms, because it's not just about meeting a standard, it's about meeting Ockenden expectations, and also the impact of staff, because it's an opportunity and it's also a risk depending where staff are in terms of their previous experience and attitude toward that model of working. So that feels like a hidden risk that's strategic rather than the immediate ones that you're absolutely excelling at. And thank you for that. So that was just a comment to strategically flush that out, Max.
Thank you. No, thank you. Yeah, good for you, Janet. Yeah, Sarah, did you want to come back on that particular point?
Yeah. Just very quickly, Janet, so thank you. We have had our meeting this week. Karen did actually want me to talk about it, but actually that'll spoil all the surprise for the next month's update papers. So we've just had our continuity of care meeting with the regional and national teams. And as Karen's put in the chat box, we can focus on that next month. I think you're absolutely right. There are some short, we're addressing very much the sort of the short-term risks, but actually some of the longer term, and actually as we roll this out further, are significant. So yeah, absolutely, I can do that next time, which will be January, I think now, won't it? But yeah, that's not a problem.
That's great, Sarah. Thank you. And it's helpful that you endorsed Janet's points as well there about the strategic risks. So thank you. That's great. Julie, may I bring you in, please? Oh, you're just still on mute, Julie.
All right, the button's a bit slow, so I press it too many times. Sarah, I noted in one of the reports, and I can't remember which it was, we've got a 50% target to reduce stillbirths. I'm interested in how we're doing against that trajectory to where we are now, and do we think that's doable? Because I know from seeing some of the incident reports some of those issues feel very much outside the trust control. So patients DNAing, people not turning up any time during the pregnancy. So I think, are we doing against it? And do we think that's doable?
Thanks, Julie. So the 50% was by 2025, and that's a national ambition that Jeremy Hunt set out a number of years ago now, and is what's led the whole maternity transformation programme, the whole Saving Babies' Lives care bundle, which we are actually doing very, very well against. And I think, again, if you refer to the dashboard and the rolling annual rate, which also includes the previous few years, you can actually see, I know we have occasional blips in month, which we obviously interrogate in great detail now, but overall our trajectory is going in absolutely the right direction, and certainly as a region, a local maternity system and as a region, we're seeing that across the board. So it's really difficult to pinpoint any one thing that's contributing to that. I think it's everything that we are doing that is now starting to take effect. So things like we've made huge changes to the way we monitor babies who are at risk of small for gestational age and not growing very well. That causes a whole load of unintended consequences. With it pushes the induction rate up and other things. However, it does seem to be very much working towards that overall reduction. And obviously all the major work that we've done on reduced fetal movement. So to put it into percentages, I'm not able to do that right now. I can probably get that information again, and I think probably as we are, I would suggest that we look at that again early new year when we've got the full year's figures, if that's okay. So we can do a little bit more of a how do we compare to last year and the year before, and is what actually is that looking like. I think we are very much on target to achieve it. But as you said as well, we obviously still have a lot of things that are outside of our control as a service, but also board control. But a lot of those I feel do very much sit with that whole public health agenda. And one of my ambitions for 2022 is that I can get a little bit more involved with the strategic, the sort of the citywide stuff as to how we influence that agenda a bit more.
Great. So we want some of those system stuff to make an impact on that for us as well. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks.
Yep, thank you. And perhaps a kind of metrics type report into the new year then, Julie, would that meet your thinking and Sarah's suggestion?
Not another report. I think we get enough reports. It'd just be good to have a view of how we're doing against that trajectory. So if it's 2025, it is quite a long-term trajectory anyway, but I'm not asking for another report. I just wondered and it's helpful to know we're going in the right direction.
The metric data. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Julie. Thank you, Sarah. And Janet, I know you did have a hand raised. Was that a previous one, or did you want to come in?
No, Sarah answered the question. It was about a systems-based approach. Because there's so much that is outside of our control, and obviously behavioural aspects as well as service delivery error is in the mix around stillbirths. And just to note, I noticed in one of the reviews that there was a process missing in terms of those that did DNA when asked, and clearly you're on with configuring the service about how and who that might be done. But it was the systems-based approach. Actors one that I was interested in, so that we preempt ahead. When you're already there, Sarah, so I don't need to say any more. Preempt ahead prenatally, so we don't end up just focusing on the end result. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Janet. Yes, and may I ask whether anybody would wish to raise anything regarding the plans at Appendix 3 and 5, which Sarah is seeking board approval for through Karen, of course, as our chief nurse. So did anybody require any further detail regarding those? May I ask whether we are content to approve and endorse and encourage Sarah to get those things going? Yeah, I think we are. Without further comments, that's looking like, yeah. Sarah, that's great. Okay, so the board approves both of those suggestions or proposals at Appendix 3 and 5. Thank you. Attain and the MS other data, and I don't think there was any requirement for any further detail to be asked, so I think we're done. So thank you again, Sarah. Many congratulations again on your Gold Award. That's absolutely brilliant. says a lot about us. Oh, the screen went
Thank you,
dark
Max.
for some reason. Yeah, so well done. Yeah, and I think we are assured both by your presentation, by the data provided, and the answers to the questions. Sarah, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers now. Good stuff. Yeah, we're very lucky to have Sarah joining us as she does at every board meeting. And thanks to fellow directors actually for the attention that we do pay to maternity. And wasn't it great to hear Sarah commend John for his work as a non-executive director championing that area. So thank you, and thank you, John, for what you do. Now look, shall we? That was item 10, of course, and I do recognise that we've got guests who've joined us at board meeting for item 12, which is the patient safety specialist update. John Wright will also be joining us. I did suggest that if John could give us another 15 minutes, then perhaps join us at 11:45, and then I'll make sure then, of course, that we get the chance to take a break, stretch our legs, and perhaps, in my example, grab something to eat, I think, before we go into the rest of this session. So, shall I now turn, please, to Ray and Karen and ask them to introduce the issue of patient safety, one that I'm very excited by the way, patient safety specialists update. And I think the intention here is to bring board's attention to our intentions regarding this and what it's all about. So, Ray, Karen, shall I turn to you guys first?
Okay. Yep. Thanks, Max.
Thank you.
So I can't see all the faces are on, but I think Judith, Connor, and Joe Hilton are joining. Apologies if I missed anybody out. I can't see everybody on my little screen, but that's who I think was joining. So patient safety specialists are a key feature of the new patient safety strategy, which has been launched nationally. We in Bradford did have an approach initially of having 4 individuals sharing that role, but for reasons which I think Judith and Joe might go into, we felt that to have one individual named in that role probably would be a better model in terms of being able to coordinate the response to all things relating to patient safety. So I don't want to steal any of Judith or Joe's thunder. So with that note, I'll hand over to them and they can give us an update on what's going on. So thanks, Judith.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Ray. I'm assuming that you've all got sight of the slide deck that we prepared. Okay. So as Ray said, the initial approach taken at Bradford was to name 4 individuals. The NHS patient safety strategy set the ambition for this new role of patient safety specialist, which was to be appointed in every NH organisation, and that was regardless of whether they were a provider, a commissioner, a regulator. They had to have a named individual taking on this role. The final specification for the role was published in August 2020, and the deadline for identifying the Trust's patient safety specialist was November 2020. And at that time, as Ray said, we took the option to share the role between 4 individuals, and that was myself, Joe Hilton, Assistant Chief Nurse, Jane Kingsley, Lead AHP, and Dr. Leanne Elliott, who is Ray's deputy, who focuses on quality. And then NHS England then published further guidance and set the expectation that all boards would have a full understanding of its role, its importance, and would provide full support to achieve the priorities as set out within the National Patient Safety Strategy. And they've provided this standardised slide deck to ensure that all boards are up to date as to where we are in the progress of those priorities, and also give us an opportunity to discuss, as Ray said, where we are as an organisation in meeting some of those. I'm going to hand over to Joe now.
Thank you, Judith.
Thanks, Judith. Hi, everybody. Hiya. So just in terms of the role, I think one of the things that has been very clear is that where there's been dedicated roles in the past around specific areas, such as a medication safety officer, maternity safety champions, that works really well. So it's been very clear from NHS England that the role of the patient safety specialist will be a leader in the organisation to absolutely focus on patient safety, to be able to escalate that, to have real visible leadership, and to provide expert support in those areas. What we've found with being patient safety specialists is there is a vast amount of information that comes from the centre to us. We have a role then in distributing that information and really providing that local strategy, system, culture, all of those networks involved around patient safety. And whilst the four of us are very happy to do that, and that is part of our role, as Ray said, we feel that a dedicated role would be really beneficial for taking the organisation further forward. There's lots of work involved around improvement and learning, and by having that dedicated role, we have networks where we can share more widely, both within the organisation and outside of the organisation as well. So having some consistency there around patient safety is a real benefit moving forward. The information that's come down, there are some set priorities that have been provided to us, so it was so that board are aware. The role, as Judah said, was first spoken about in 2019, but now from 2021 onwards, we've had much more specific detail around expectations and a full list of priorities that are expected from us nationally that we're focusing on at a local level. The detail of that work and the work plan around that is presented to the Quality and Patient Safety Academy, but we wanted board to know that was taking place. In addition, one of the key deliverables is the introduction of a patient safety syllabus. This is around training, and that's some training that will be available for all members of the organisation and specifically available for board members as well. So that was released as an e-learning platform at the end of October, and we're just working through the detail now of having that available to everyone as a high priority training. Back to Judith.
Thank you, Jo. So I'm just going to skip to I'm going to skip early milestones and go straight to the priorities. So just to give you a brief update as to where we are with these 9 priorities. So from a just culture perspective, we are working with OD and HR on their civility and just culture work. Jo and I are members of that new programme board that's been set up. We're also linking with the outputs of the staff survey, so specifically focusing on those questions where patient safety is an element, and obviously we'll make sure that any plans that we go forward address those issues that may have arisen from that staff survey. We've already reviewed our duty of candour policy, building on the principles of being open and making it really explicit to staff about what our expectations are in reporting safety events, as well as being open and transparent with patients and families, and ensuring that staff who were involved in a safety event get the appropriate support at the right time. From a national patient safety alert perspective, we are currently overhauling our internal systems and processes to strengthen our timely response to the alerts. We have never missed a response, but it's always been close to the wire, too uncomfortable for my liking. So we're really stripping that process right back. And now that we've appointed our senior quality governance lead, this is going to be one of her key priorities for the next couple of months. We are improving our quality of incident reporting by looking at different methods and ways of capturing patient safety incident and event data. We're currently piloting and testing out a system in the urgent and emergency care centre around an email box that provides much more succinct way of reporting or raising a concern, and then we're picking that up on a daily basis through the governance team. In terms of transitioning to the new system that is replacing STICE and the National Reporting Learning System, we're currently working with our incident reporting vendor Datix to see how we can have that smooth transition, which it may require an upgrade to the cloud-based system so that we can upload the incidents in a much more timely way, but we're just working that through. In terms of the patient safety incident response framework, this is, I think, one of the most significant changes as we move forward with the National Patient Safety Strategy, in that we, with the commissioners being absorbed into the ICS and no longer having that oversight in terms of serious incident management and report sign-off and identifying the learning and improvement aspects, this is now going to shift, we think, probably towards the provider. I was at a roundtable meeting on Monday with the regional and national patient safety teams, and there is moves afoot to where we've suspended that 60-day time frame for a report to be produced and sent through to the commissioners. That looks like it's going to be a permanent removal from April going forward next year, and the shift will be that the providers and board of directors will have sign off of those reports. But also what we've got to remember in the back of that, and in the back of our mind, is that we won't be investigating as many serious incidents as we currently do. We'll be using different methods. So root cause analysis will absolutely be gone. We'll be looking at more after action reviews, thematic analysis of incidents that have occurred quickly, quite simultaneously, or a theme that's coming through, and hot debriefs with teams to identify learning and improvement in a much more timely way. So that's something that the board needs to be aware of, that they won't be seeing reports in the same way that they have in the past, but also the accountability for signing off those reports may well sit with yourselves. So very much a focus on learning and improvement, and links with other organisations from a system-based approach to learning and understanding and improving. In terms of involving patients and patient safety, we already have a research-based questionnaire on our IQVIA system. It's called PMOS, Patient Measurement of Safety, and Joe and I are working with the patient experience team to look how we can embed that across the organisation, and there's currently a bid in for funding to support patient experience in terms of gathering that insight at real time, with the appointment of perhaps some further patient experience staff and the use of volunteers, as well as appointing patient safety partners, which is a requirement of the new strategy. And I'm involved in a group, a place-based approach, working with the CCG, the Care Trust and Airedale to develop a business case to recruit patient safety partners that we can use across place. With NHS England's regional support, they're really excited by this because it hasn't been mooted to them by any other organisations to do it as a place perspective, and they will support us in terms of recruitment, training, and provide coaching and mentorship, as this is quite a significant new role. Joe mentioned about the education, so that new system went live at the end of October, and we're just having to work through what that means for us in Bradford in terms of which levels of staff will require to be accessing the various levels of that education, as well as finding a solution for the NEDs to be able to access that system. And also our involvement in the improvement programmes with the Academic Health Science Network, as well as BRI here at Bradford, and building much stronger links with our partners. And some of the options is that the Quality and Patient Safety Academy might have a broader role in terms of having oversight of those quality improvement programmes, as well as linking with our quality account. And obviously there's more work to be done around the COVID response, and we're just still waiting for some further information around that. Okay, thank you. Back to Joe.
Thank you. So I think the last slide in the pack just really summarises everything that we've said, and there's just a couple of things to point out from that. So one of the asks would be for us to have a non-exec director who would lead on patient safety, that can work with the patient safety specialists on this agenda. and really that all board members feel that they have awareness now of the patient safety specialist role, and we're happy to take any questions that you have or any comments you want to make on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both Judith and Joe. That was terrific. Of course, a really, really important matter that the board supports entirely. So we will have a full-time standalone role, patient safety specialist. May I ask whether that individual has been identified yet or not, Judith and Joe? Apologies if that should have been obvious to me from the papers, and of course, if it's not the right time to reveal that, I respect that as we are at an open public board here. So have we decided who it's going to be?
It's actually out to advert at the moment, Max. It closes on Sunday. We've based it on the national job description. Thankfully, they provided one for us. Yeah. And it's gone out, and I've just checked it yesterday. We've actually had 9 applicants so far, so I'm really quite excited that we get a really good candidate from that crop.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And may I also ask, Judith, is it determined now where this person will sit in terms of the organisation, who they'll be line managed by? Because directors, I think, will be keen to support them, but interested to know that. So
yeah, so that individual will report directly to me, but obviously the 4 individuals, myself, Leanne, Joe and Jane, will certainly not be stepping away. We will obviously be providing significant support and coaching, and obviously that gives them then the tendrils to be able to go back into the organisation through the various different routes.
Fantastic, fantastic. Patient safety specialist. And yeah, Judith, that's perhaps a time for me as well to emphasise the point in the papers about Ray being our identified lead executive, so the chief medical officer, yeah, but that it's acknowledged that it's a shared agenda across all executives. That seems to me to be an important point to perhaps emphasise. But I will open up, of course, for question or comment, and also welcome John. John Wright, thank you for indulging us, John. I'll explain to you exactly why there's a slight delay, but it's great to have you with us. So we'll be coming to you next, John. Karen, would you like to come in, please? Then I'll tap.
Thanks. So it's just to reinforce really that this is a really different way of approaching things around patient safety, and it's going to take a lot to get our heads around. And I liken it to the journey I've been on with maternity. So at first you sort of go, oh my word, something terrible's happened, something terrible's happened, and you want to find out why and fix it, and not blame, but hold somebody to account. And this is a very different way of doing things. This is about really learning, really understanding, making sure people feel confident to come forward and to speak to this agenda. And then the most important thing, I think, is, which we probably don't do as well, is that learning that comes out from it and how we share that learning. And I think it's really great that we've got, 4 people as part of the roles now that have got this agenda, supported by Ray and I, with an individual full-time that's going to be leading on this. And I think we'll make great headway.
Thank you very much, Karen. That's really useful. And Altaf, would you like to come in, please? Altaf, if you are speaking, I can't see it.
Sorry,
I've got you now. Yeah, you're coming
through. Trouble triggering my mic off. Yeah, Joanne, Judith, thank you for that strategy brief. Fantastic work. I'm looking forward to seeing the deliverables. I think for safety improvements to be delivered, I think you're absolutely right to emphasise that you need a no blame culture, and you don't need to hold people to account. But what we need is a culture where systems and processes are put in place to make those improvements as a whole. And in that, I think what I've seen in other sectors like the aircraft industry and construction, it's been very important to protect and reward people for being open and honest. And in that, you may want to anonymize who the person is that's generate the alert during kind of inquiries and revisiting processes and looking for input. So I think anonymization, confidentiality is important. In that case, people need to be protected. that sometimes hasn't happened in the past in healthcare, and people have been unwilling because of career implications and other things to come forward. I think also I'm interested in your cloud tool as well in terms of reporting. I think that type of thing is really good. I've seen that people sometimes reluctant to use email as a tool because it identifies them. If you've got a cloud tool that's broad and open, it'd be good to have that anonymized as well, just so that you're kind of alerted without people being identified, and you can see clusters in a problem and preventative action taken without people feeling that they're going to be finger pointed. That's my only really thought.
Thank you, Altaf. Extremely useful. Thank you. Yeah. Are there any further comments or questions? Judith or Joe, may I just inquire as to what the exact role would be of the non-exec director? I mean, thank you for taking the interest in inviting contribution from a non-exec director. But could I just clarify exactly what your thinking is in terms of their contribution to the work?
Okay, thank you, Max. I think one is being that champion and also being that critical friend to their other non-exec director colleagues, being able to think about putting that patient and walking in their shoes, I guess, is the key. And also, I think just to pick up on what Altaf said there, is we have to create psychological safety, a culture of psychological safety for all staff, whether you're a board member or whether you're a domestic or a porter or whatever discipline you're working in, and that's, I think, that is role modelling. So it's role modelling from the board all the way down to the grassroots and back up again. So the role is really just being that champion and that role model and the critical friend.
Yeah, and perhaps attending the patient safety committee.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, if they can come to the quality, well, the patient safety, do you mean the patient safety group that sits under the academy? Or
that's exactly what I was trying to find out, really, Judith, as to what the time expenditure might be. So
the patient safety group meets on a monthly basis, which is 2 hours long. But what I will say is that patient safety group is being extended to the patient safety partners once they've been appointed, and our other stakeholders. So already we've got contribution from the CCGs and our other partners, the Care Trust and Airedale are also attending. So it's a forum where you get that shared learning and understanding as well. So absolutely welcome a non-exec director to participate in that.
Lovely. That's absolutely great, Judith. So in the spirit of not trying to get an answer to that just right now, shall I undertake to take that away and speak with Ray and fellow non-executive directors about that, and we can make a decision. But certainly the suggestion goes down very well. It's just a matter of making sure it's in keeping with the idea of NED champion roles, etc. So there's a national debate about that at the moment. But no, thank you. So thanks so much for your insight. Absolutely terrific. The ask of the board is that we note the importance of this bespoke role and how it aligns to the Trust's ambition to be an outstanding healthcare provider, and that we agree to receive regular updates on progress against the priorities as set out in the National Patient Safety Strategy. May I suggest that I'm delighted to see such high quality people leading on this in the Trust. I really mean that. This is important stuff and we need to be on top of it, don't we? So I'm delighted to have heard from you today and to endorse those. Can I ask would anybody object to either of those recommendations? May I assume that as a board we unanimously support the ask of the board, having heard what we've heard? It would appear so. There's no further comment. So Judith, Joe, great stuff. Thank you very much. The board entirely endorses the work being done and supports the recommendations set out in the paper. Thank you very much indeed, both of you.
Thanks.
Great stuff. Thank you. Yeah, that's really useful work, isn't it? And I know, because of some of the other work, I know that it's taking a real high national profile. So I'm delighted to see the work that's been done on that. Ray and Karen, thank you for your part in making sure that happens. And Ray, you and I can speak about the non-exec contribution to that ongoing work, which I'm excited by, but I just need to think through actually. So thank you very much indeed. Great stuff. Okay, well, shall we move now then to item 13, please, and we can take a break following that. So John, if you can hear me okay, Professor John Wright joins us, which is great. John, we began our board meeting this morning with a presentation from the clinical business unit of critical care, anaesthesia and pain. And of course, with a significant contribution that they've made during the pandemic response, you might imagine it led to a great deal of interest among directors in the spirit of trying to support what they're doing and learn actually from what they've done. So that's the reason we're just running a little behind. My ask of you might be that if you're able to be as succinct and pragmatic as possible, but that of course is in the spirit of us all being interested in Bradford as a city of research. You might also know, John, as well, that it's now a standing item on our board of directors meetings that we consider the role of research and what we can learn from that and how it might influence our decision making. So I'll stop there, John, and I'll turn to you, and you can have as long as you need with the board, John, but it'd be great to hear from you.
Thanks, Max. Yeah, I got the same message as you did from John Holden just now on WhatsApp. He said, running over a little bit, and can I convert my 1 hour multimedia presentation into 140 characters on Twitter? So anyway, I'm going to spare you my presentation. Thanks, John, for all that effort that I put into it. And let me just give you a little bit of background about where research has come from and where it is now. And I'll take about 10 minutes of your time, if that's okay. So when we became a teaching hospital in the noughties, one of the obvious gaps that we had compared to our other big teaching hospitals around the country was that we had no research. And all these fancy teaching hospitals in Leeds and Manchester and Oxford and Cambridge, they'd built up their fantastic research departments over many years, glass temples to science, with lots of money and also lots of support from the partner university, because they tend to be very symbiotic. So when we became a teaching hospital, it was quite obvious that we didn't have much really foundation. But we looked inside ourselves and we thought, what can we do without any money? Because this is Bradford, you know, we're used to doing that sort of stuff. And we found 3 acorns, Max. One was around patient safety. Liam Donaldson, before he was Chief Medical Officer, was Regional Director here, and he appointed me to my job 25 years ago here to get rid of me, basically. And so patient safety seemed one of those things that nobody else was interested in, but it was something that we had been working with Liam on developing the ideas and the concepts with. And so that was one of the acorns. The other was older people. John Young, do you remember John Young? What a star he was. He's fantastic. He's retired, but he was the older people's czar for a while for the UK, for England. And he'd started having this sort of small research team at St. Luke's, stuck in a cleaning cupboard over there. So he was another acorn. And the third acorn was born in Bradford. You know, how can we actually get our people, our families involved in this fantastic city? How can we actually get them involved? So I'm going to skip the 140 slides that I had prepared to show that evolution over the last 15 years to come up to modern day. So here we are, 2021, and we have one of 3 national patient safety centres. My fantastic colleague Rebecca Lawton, who you heard from recently, I think, yes. Manchester Imperial and Bradford. There you go. It's coming up for renewal, so we'll need all the help to get that going. And you know, things like PMOS that Judith and Joe mentioned, that came from there. Our national mortality review programme for the UK came from that patient safety. So very applied. Our older people's team is the finest ageing research team in the UK. Under the leadership of Anne Forster now, Andy Clegg, things like the Electronic Frailty Index, which is nationally used by GPs everywhere. All the work on frailty and stroke prevention has come out of that. I'm born in Bradford. What an amazing study. The world's best medical research study ever. And, you know, we've got 50,000 Bradfordians in part of Born in Bradford now. I talk about city of research, not as, you know, some sort of glass temple where scientists in white coats work. It's about people, and no other city in the world has that level of engagement as we have in Bradford. So that's great. On top of those, we've multiplied. So we've got, thanks to John Holden and his, John's already WhatsApping me to say I'm taking too much time. But thanks to John Holden, a couple of years ago, we got the Yorkshire and Humber Applied Research Collaboration. We snuck it away from Leeds and Sheffield and brought it to Bradford, where it belongs. We've got the Wolfson Centre for Applied Health Research. We've got the Yorkshire and Humber Improvement Academy. We've got, more recently, one of 5 national patient recruitment centres that's been so important during all the vaccine trials and all that sort of stuff, under the leadership of the fantastic Dinesh Saralaya, and Connected Bradford, run by my fantastic colleague Kuldeep Sahal. This is the richest data set in the UK. It's amazing. This is Born in Bradford on steroids, how we can use routine data, all the fantastic genomics and metabolomics that came out of Born in Bradford. Actually, it's the routine data that's the power. So here we are. Over the last 15 years, we have never asked for a single penny from the trust. It's one of my criteria when I took up this job, that I wouldn't ask for any money until today. No, I'm only kidding. I'm not going. We brought in about £200 million in research funding to the city, and in projects like Better Start Bradford, which was down to us, Jump, which is the physical activity programme, Leap, the Arts Council one, all due to projects like Born in Bradford. £200 million. We've got a staff of about 200 now. When we first advertised my first research fellow 15 years ago, we had one applicant. And it was just after the riots. And so I asked around and they said, oh, why would you want to go and work in Bradford? It's the death knell of a research career. Now we have people from all over the world contacting us to say, can I come and work in your organisation? So there you go. That's fantastic. And the impact, it's all about impact. This is all about research that makes a difference. That's our strapline. So the Clean Air Zone that just got the local government award for city, that came out of Born in Bradford and all the research that we've done around the harms of air pollution. All the glasses and classes that Nadeem Zahari was mentioning a couple of weeks ago, that came out of Born in Bradford. All the autism work, all the patient safety. So it's endless, fantastic, high impact stuff that we've done. So it is a fairy tale, and we should be proud of what we've done in Bradford. No other trust has this Bradford Institute of Health Research like we have. They have universities that partner them, but this is ours, and it's a partnership approach. It reflects our Act as One approach in the city. This isn't just the teaching hospital taking dominance. It's a partnership between primary care, secondary care, the care trust, and the local authority, most importantly. And that's one of the directions of travel for us. 90% of health research and medical research goes on biomedical research. 90% of our health is down to the wider determinants, the air we breathe, the green space, our houses, our jobs. And we've got to rebalance that, and we're in a good place to try and do that, Max. So that's one of the steps that we're going to help the local authority to become get their own research centre in the next few months, hopefully. So it's a great fairy tale. And since you're the fairy godmother on the board, I have 3 requests today, maybe more. I haven't quite. No, I'll ditch those other 15 slides, John. Don't worry. But the first one is to we're running out of space again in the issue. I know we've got these fantastic buildings, but because we're employing so many more people, we run out of space pretty quickly. We have our own money to build a £2 million extension, but because of some ceiling in capital development across the district, which seems like crazy nonsense, we can't actually move on that. So if you could, I know the clinical areas always get priority, but if you can bump us up a list, if there's some, if Owen Patterson's around and you can bung him a £5 or something and you can get us up the list a bit, that would be good. The last 18 months has shown the importance of science and research, and this is a time to reflect that in what we're trying to do in the trust. The second is about data. We have this remarkable connected Bradford data set. It's like, and the analogy I'd use is that it's like decoding DNA in our garage, because it's a small team trying to get on top of this vast amount of data, but it is the future. The vastly wealthy tech companies, Apple and Google and Facebook, they are data companies. They have your data and they make money from it. And we want that public sector data across social care, health services, environmental data, the stuff that we've linked already. We want that to be a public good to improve health and well-being in Bradford. It's our data, let's use it. And then the third bit for my request, my third 3 wishes on my Aladdin's lamp. Is that am I allowed 3 wishes? Yes. You are a very good-looking fairy godmother as well, Max. So the third is a more philosophical view about what we do. As a trust, as an anchoring institution, and one of the continuing messages of everything that we do in research, most of our research is done out in the community rather than the wards. So we do lots of great clinical trials, but actually the most powerful stuff recognises that it is out in the community, and all the messages from that are around prevention. And I know it's an old adage that prevention is better than the cure, and our role as a secondary care organisation is to pick people up from the bottom of the cliff and repair them. But if we're not cognizant of this growing pipeline of ill health that we see in our children born in Bradford, we've done body scans recently on our 9-year-olds, and our South Asian girls, 9-year-old girls, have 2 kilograms of fat more than their white British counterparts. That, this is, in 20 years' time, you'll be getting a big bill to build a bigger diabetes unit. So let's think about how we as an institution can work across the city to do that. And to do that, there's 2 main areas really. One, well, there's an economic growth, which is a harder thing to do, but one is around physical activity. Cars are crippling. They're killing us and they're crippling our society. And we've got to find better ways of encouraging active travel, like some of the European cities. And then food systems is the other. We have very unhealthy food systems, and we have in our poorest areas. If you go to Ilkley, there's not. I don't know if there's a McDonald's in Ilkley. I suspect not. But there's not many chicken shacks in Ilkley, are there, Max? But if you go to Gullington, they're food swamps when it comes to fast food outlets, and food deserts when it comes to food choices. So that's something that we really need to take seriously and to have a holistic view about about what we're doing. So that's 10 minutes. So the other 49 minutes of I was going to sing as part of that's my last slide, but I'll spare that.
What an inspiring briefing. Thank you so much, John. Seriously, I mean, to begin with 3 acorns and turn to 3 requests is a very good way of using the 10 minutes. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, seriously, how inspiring. And I have some personal knowledge to John and I, of course, haven't spoken before today regarding this, but I was very involved with the initial patient safety research team, and I know that they're having some significant national influence actually. And so to hear about John Young, of course, who went on to work with the commissioners, and of course we know about Born in Bradford, and then all the other things that John quickly mentioned there that's growing has been fantastic. In terms of the requests, John, can I just check with one of them, the data access issue? Were there particular blockages there that cause a problem, or what was the main point you would like us to know?
This has been the hardest project in my life. The information governance is a nightmare, but we're through that. We've been doing this for 4 years, so we've got all the data linkage, but it's a big project, and it's a small research team running it at the moment. We've nurtured this child, this beautiful child, and we need a home in the NHS system for it going forward. I've talked to Mel before about it. I don't think Mel's on the call, is she?
Not today, John. In fact, she's not well, unfortunately.
Oh, isn't she? Yeah, and Paul Rice. It's Paul. I think Paul's on the. Yeah, Paul. So Paul knows all about it. He's fed up with me bending his ear about this, but it is the future. We tend to use data for performance management, and we do that we feed the machine, whereas data, as we've shown in Born in Bradford, can be a catalyst for innovation and improvement. And that's what we need to turn it to. And for that, we need more creative whole system data. That's what we built, but we need a home for it. And we need, I think Mel and Paul are committed to that, but I couldn't emphasize how urgent and important this is.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, I'll not seek to achieve any sort of board approval for particular issues here today. We may just want to think about those things. But could I maybe turn to John Holden, perhaps, and to Ray? John, I thought that some of what I heard there might resonate with our newly formed 5-year corporate strategy. which we hope to launch. I was thinking of the place element of that in the 4 elements. So things like good use of data, prevention strategies, physical activity, food systems. Is it possible that as a trust we might use the place element of our corporate strategies to support the work our research colleagues are doing, do you think? And any other thoughts you may have on what you heard from John there, please, John?
Yeah, so we've already got a research section in the draft, which we prepared in consultation with John and his team. So I think in terms of, in the narrower sense, the research function, I think we've got some text that we're very happy with. I think my answer to the broader points about upstream prevention and the underlying causes, which, of course, go way beyond the normal brief of an acute hospital. I think our mechanism for tackling that is not for the hospital on its own to try and turn itself into public health. It's for us to throw ourselves wholeheartedly into Act as one and to recognise that all of these things are connected. There's that wonderful neon sign in BAIHR that says everything is connected. Well, it is. And there is no better example, I think, that if we want to change the life course of Bradford's young citizens, and if we want to impact on this, Titanic sailing towards us in 10 years' time, then the action is now and the action is upstream. And I violently agree the points about chicken shacks and exercise and everything else. John will be aware that I think the council's organising an active Bradford discussion coming very soon. We are very active in all of our Act as One work streams where Saj and Karen, myself and others lead on individual items. We've got health inequality disciplines in all of those. There is no simple answer to what John describes because it's societal. But being an acute hospital, in the past, we would have said, well, that's somebody else's problem. We're not paid to do public health. We hit the targets, we balance the books. What do you want? I think our strategy will absolutely acknowledge that as an anchor institution, as a kind of landmark in this place, we've got a big role to play. We have 500,000 outpatient contacts every year. We should be using them. We should be using our influence. And I'll tell you when I do the chief exec's update that we opened 2 new cycling facilities yesterday, which are all about, it's a small step, but all about getting cars off the road, supporting active travel, etc., etc. So I strongly agree with him. I agree with your suggestion, Max, that our strategy ought to elucidate that stuff. I will still say, and this will sound like a throwback, there's only so much we can do in our strategy, and really part of our role is to influence our partners and to make sure we're all pulling in the same direction and all doing the right stuff. But you won't hear me disagree. John's right, of course. And if I had the magic one that we've heard referred to several times already, I think it's about poverty. I think it's about economic regeneration. And the question we should be asking is, what can we do to put people into meaningful paid work, to support them out of poverty, to improve educational attainment, to give people chances to look at careers in health and care beyond some of the stereotypical doctor nurse? How do we change that paradigm? So that's the role I think we should play as a trust. And I'm more than happy to accept the challenge that we need to reflect that in our next strategy.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, John. That's really useful context from a director of strategy and integration, of course. So thank you, John. Yeah, I'll open up for comments, and of course, John Wright, I'll certainly come back to you at the end for final thoughts. But let's hear from colleagues around the virtual table. So, Paul, would you like to come in, please, Paul Rice?
Thanks, Max. And I mean, John knows you can bend my ear perennially. I mean, we're on exactly the same page. I mean, just linking back to John Holden's previous comment, I mean, there is no better opportunity for higher value employment in the city of Bradford than building on the infrastructure, the legacy, and the appetite and ambition that John Wright has just articulated. This analysis isn't going to do itself. We are going to have to create high value roles and high skilled roles for these individuals to be attracted to and retained to. I think we are in a transition period. Colleagues know that the CCG's functions as they currently stand will morph into the ICS early next year, and the place and space that continues therefore to create for us at Place is significant. And we'll continue to want to fill that in terms of fit for purpose infrastructure, which is an enabling layer, but then fundamentally embracing everything else that both Johns have said, which is about the potency and opportunity around this. We're doing some stuff now about that infrastructure piece and hosting and homing, but that's the sort of very much the necessary but not sufficient bit. The bit that has to follow through is the purposes to which we put this analysis to, and the people who have the strength, the skills base and the experience to do that analysis in a meaningful way. And what John and colleagues have consistently shown is that understanding the application of the knowledge is as important in framing the question as actually having the skills to interrogate it. So I think we're in the right direction of travel. I think John's appropriately impatient, but I think our direction of travel is well set and is genuinely in a partnership.
Thank you, Paul. Very helpful indeed. Thank you. Yes, Karen, may I turn to you, please? And then we've got Altaf and Mohammed who'd like to come in. So Karen first, please.
Thank you. It was just to stress what John was saying actually about throwing ourselves into that place and act as one, because we can't tackle this on our own. And of all the Act as One programmes have a focus on health inequalities or health equality. And one of the sort of frustrations I have is that we've got all of this richness of data, all of this information, yet there seems to be a disconnect, and I know John Wright feels this too, between getting to the solution point and putting the actions in that means we'll really make a difference. And it's really hard in the climate at the moment, sort of pushing something that will make a difference in 20 or 30 years time, or even 10 years time. And I think COVID's just put us all back in the now again. So we're all worried about what's happening now. And it's almost taken away that ability to see into the future. But that's what we need to ground ourselves back in as part of restart, which is being aware of that sort of health promotion, health inequalities. Because, and I stressed it to the national maternity team the other day, you drive around Bradford, look at Bradford, that you'll see things in Bradford that you've not seen in other places for tens of years. And we can influence that and be part of that, and we should be.
Very good point, Karen. Yeah, a focus on future or long-term opportunities. Yeah, thank you, Karen. Yeah. Altaf, would you like to come in, please? Then Mohammed.
Yeah, I'm really pleased and to hear from John. He definitely is the goal of that. Is Bradford. Absolutely brilliant work. I think sometimes, when we've recently discussed John's strategy paper, which I won't go into too much detail because I know it's on the agenda later, we talk about wanting well-being to be a focus. We talk about connected patient. We talk about patients being an active participant. And I think we're all on board saying that data should be kept for public good and away from big tech wherever possible. I think we're all supportive of that. But John is the answer. And as such, we as a board have to align our strategy with our actions and actually support John much more wholeheartedly within the constraints of budgets and other ambitions. But to be honest, if we don't tackle obesity, diabetes, well-being, chronic illness, we won't be able to afford to treat the people that be presenting themselves in a decade or so at our doorstep. And that is an acute trust hospital's business. So, I'm just really would like to emphasize that point, that as a board, we have a duty to take that on board.
Very good point, Altaf. Yeah, thank you. And Mohammed, would you like to come in, please?
Thanks, Max. Thank you, John, as ever. Very insightful and entertaining presentation. So thanks so much for that. I'm pleased that we're getting more regular updates in terms of research at the board. It's really good for the board to see that, and that's very welcome. One of the challenges I think that I've had over the last couple of years on the board is that just that top line visibility in a regular way in terms of the key metrics. So, John, if you were able to send us on a monthly basis your kind of dashboard, top line dashboard in terms of what work you're doing and how it's impacting, what differences it's making. I'm not sure what that metrics are, John, and it's not my area, but I'd love to be able to see those integrated with the other dashboards we have across the various areas that we have around performance, around partnership working. I'd like to see the two things side by side, and we get your regular narrative updates, but I think what I'm missing is that regular top line dashboards, so we can see them in the same way we look at everything else that we're doing as a trust.
Thank you. Yes, a good point, Mohammed. Yeah, that kind of, so it's in that sort of linking the actual research metrics into what we're doing, our strategic objectives, our operational focus, for example. Yes, yeah, very, very good point. Yeah, thank you, Mohammed. Don't think there's any further questions or comments. So, John, shall I return to you? I think before I do, I'll just say that obviously you raised 3 key issues with us, which is always a good move. The idea of more space being needed, the blockages or potential problems with data access and what we can do with data, and of course our support, our visible support for prevention strategies. And I certainly wasn't going to propose raising an action or anything, but I assume that Ray, as our executive lead, as Chief Medical Officer for research, would perhaps commit to taking those away and considering them in respect of board involvement and support. Ray, are you still with us, or I'm just wondering?
He's had to depart, Max, but we'll take that message away and we'll discuss with Ray. But he's
of course, yes, because it's Ray and Sarge, isn't it, that have gone to for the Hsg Awards, which is wonderful. So let's endorse that now anyway. I've said that as chairman, and that Ray, we will ask Ray to, as Karen says, give the people headspace and to take on those considerations. John, shall I return to you then for final thoughts? You've raised insight amongst the board, without a doubt. There is clear support for everything that our research colleagues are doing. Is there anything you've heard that you would wish to comment on, or anything further you would wish to bring to our attention?
Just gratitude, actually. Listening to people's feedback just made me realise how lucky I am to work with such great colleagues. This sounds like a suck-up, so apologies. But John and Karen and Paul in particular, as executive directors, to be sharing that vision, the reason we are success is this is a communal team effort. Altaf's comment about the urgency of this, I thought was really well made, actually. It is our duty, actually, not to think just about, is to think about 20 years' time, like any company would, about what impact this is going to have. So well put, Altaf. And Mohammed, let's do that. We do regular reports to the Quality Academy. So the metrics of research are grant income. It's quite easy, actually. Grant income, publications, and patient recruitment. So we can do that quite easally. There's something more about a bit of sort of impact stuff which we could pull out to bring it to life a little bit, such as the Glasses for Classes, which came out a couple of weeks ago, hit the national media. You wouldn't have known that it was born in Bradford. You wouldn't have known it was related to Bradford at all, actually. But who cares, in a way? It's a good project helping children to improve their education, helping poor children get better education, which goes back to John's point about economic growth. So yeah, happy to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. That's great. And can I thank colleagues as well for the chat comments, which are all noted and, of course, form part of the minutes of the board. Will reflect that. John, great to hear you commend John, Paul, and others for their support. And it was nice as well to hear Karen say, wasn't it, as our chief nurse, that she saw the need actually to give some attention to longer term projects and recognising our need at the moment to focus on what's happening right now. It's absolutely right, though, that we do give attention to those things that are going to take longer to come through. We know that they work. Colleagues, shall we treat this as a terrific update from our Director of Research, which has been great. So it's insight for us, it's knowledge for us, but it's also, and thank you, John, a reminder of some of the things that we may wish to consider as things that we could work on, things to do, things to improve. I think that's the purpose of it. I don't think there was an intention to get answers right now, but we've noted that Ray will note those 3 key messages, and John, you go from here with genuine support from all the board and appreciation, actually, of the role that research plays. No, you do, and it's a standing item on board. We recognise our own need to be able to link the research work to what we are doing ourselves, because we love you as a trust. It's terrific. We're terrifically proud of what we've got here. and it's big up Bradford, isn't it? Because we don't do that enough. So it's great. Okay, so I'll leave it at that, John, unless there was anything further you wanted to add in final comment.
No, lovely to see you all again. Very honoured to be with you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the insight you've given us, John. That's been great. Thank you. Okay, so really, really helpful session. Thanks, everybody, actually, for your comments and contributions. Yeah, I just want to compliment us, actually, as a board for the way in which we're re-engaging, I think, with the research work that we're doing. It's terrific to see. Many exec directors have picked up on that, and of course Ray, as exec lead for research, is clearly putting his weight behind that. So I found that really, really interesting, and it was interesting that none of us would have disagreed with the kind of three key points he talked about. Any chance of a bit more space for our people, the data access issues, what we can do with that, and of course prevention strategies and our opportunity to influence. John, thank you for your comments on the opportunity to influence at place and act as one. Great stuff. Okay, well, we've taken a lot in this morning session, haven't we? I think it's about time we all took a break, and I'll come back and as chairman try our best to get through everything. We've committed till about 3 o'clock, of course, anyway, haven't we, in terms of using the closed board session as well. My computer says it's 12:30. I'm assuming that's right. Yeah, it is. So can I suggest actually that we do take a 20-minute break now? Let's have a proper break now. 12:30 to 12:50, I suggest, and we'll come back at 12:50 and get through the other matters that have to be dealt with today. But I hope you'll agree with me. This delay, this extension is all in the context of terrific inputs and terrific debate. Okay. So I propose that we rejoin at 12:50. We'll be as pragmatic as we can, getting through everything, of course, but I do promise that we will finish on time, even if we have to defer some items. I hope we don't have to. We'll move on. Okay, so 20-minute break, 12:50, we'll restart board. Okay, thanks, everybody. And Sheridan, our colleagues, if you're listening,